My name's Anna Chiat, and I'm a professor at the UGA College of Agriculture, and I'm an extension specialist in behavioral health, and I'll be the moderator for this session. And I'd like to get started with the program. And I'm really excited about this program. Beth asked me to moderate it and speak because I don't know about you, but 2024 was a rough year. Anybody else have a rough year? It was hard. So 2025, we're looking to, with realism, with strength, but with some hope. So this afternoon, I really think, is a session about thinking about hope in different ways. I'm going to talk in a minute about building our mental resilience so that we make great decisions and so that our business prospers. We're going to have several people talking about farm and family and the future and the hope that we have there. And then we're going to have people talking about how to get resources for the farm, to build hope through knowing that you've got the resources to continue. So there's a lot of hope that we're going to talk about here, and I hope that that's beneficial for you all. I also hope that today, throughout the conference, you look at all the people here, you talk to the folks who put this conference together, talk to the sponsor, and know that everyone here is in this together. We're with you. Nobody walks alone. Nobody's doing this alone. It's not just you. We're all here together. And so I hope this is a place where you can get resources and you can get rejuvenated and the information that you want. So with that, I am going to move to the first presenter. Surprise, I'm your first speaker too, so you're sort of stuck with me for a little bit. Again, I'm Anna Chiat, I'm with UGA Extension, and I'm going to be talking about the new competitive advantage is mental resilience. And I think this is really important because margins are so thin and things are so challenging that everybody needs every advantage, every leg up that they can get. And one of the best legs up we can get is making good decisions and thinking clearly under stress and quickly, particularly after adversity is hit. So that's mental resilience. And I want to talk to you some today about what is it, what reduces the stress that can cause mental resilience, what reduces mental resilience, what hurts it, how we can protect it and improve it. And I promise I'm going to do this without showing like any brain scans or saying anything about neurotransmitters or anything horrible like that. I really want to provide you with some just basic pragmatic information on ways to clarify your thinking so you can make the best possible decisions. Okay, I don't know about you, but sometimes I go to these conferences and all these talks blur. So I'm going to cut to the chase. If you forget everything else that I say, remember these three things. Sometimes you can fix a stressor, but not always. But you can always manage your stress response to keep that stress from hurting your resilience. You've always got control over that. Second thing to remember is sometimes your brain is not your friend. We'll talk more about it, but sometimes your brain is not your friend, and you need to be careful with that. And third is that the best defense is a good offense. And I know I'm from UGA, and I have no right to talk about football anymore, but the best defense is a good offense. Remember those three things. Okay, so what's mental resilience? Mental resilience is just the ability to bounce back or to make good decisions even when you're under pressure, to be able to keep thinking clearly, and it's got a bunch of pieces to it. It means your memory's got to work well. It means you have to be able to think quickly and nimbly. It means you have to be able to focus your attention so you can think deeply when you're trying to make decisions and thinking about a problem. It means you have to have good judgment, and it means you need to have skills in problem solving. All of that comes together for mental resilience, and if you can do all of this, you're making the best possible decisions for your farm. It's really essential, and people kind of go, yeah, you know, I don't have time for this stuff. It's essential if you're going to run your business. Okay, so let's start by talking about decisions. How many decisions do you think the average person makes in a day? What do you think? Just holler out some numbers. Somebody said 1,000. I heard something else. 20,000. Whoa, you make a lot of decisions. What else? But I'm hearing big numbers, right? According to some research done at Cornell, it's something like 22,000. Apparently, almost 300 decisions a day we make have to do with food. So just what we're eating is 300 decisions a day. And in terms of solid, important decisions that we make in a day, it's over 100. So decision-making skills are really essential. And there are enemies of good decision-making, lots of them, short-term and long-term ones. Short-term, sleep problems. I don't know, first night in a hotel, I never sleep really well. I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm not thinking as clearly as I could. Sleep problems interrupt your decision-making. Medications. Anybody ever take like NyQuil or DayQuil and the next day you wake up and you just feel stupid? You can't think clearly? Lots of medications can do that, and sometimes they do it subtly. Substances. A six-pack might help you sleep, but the next day you're not thinking so good. Overeating, inactivity, strong emotions, trying to make a good decision while you're really mad at someone, is not a good idea. So these really will interrupt good decision-making. Longer terms, health problems and what it does to your body and the medications involved in that can be detrimental to good decision-making. Behavioral health problems, people who are anxious or people who are experiencing depression, who've had some stressors. Chronic fatigue, chronic self-neglect, and chronic stress, which I think lots of people in farming are familiar with. Those things are your enemies when it comes to making good decisions. So what do? Short term, the important thing is to just be aware that your decision-making is impaired and think carefully and maybe get a second opinion and double-check your thinking. Recognize that you're not thinking straight. If you don't have to make a decision in the moment, wait until you can get a good night's sleep before you make the decision. If you can. Sometimes you can't. And then really make a plan for what's causing me to not make good decisions. How can I manage that better so that my thinking gets a little clearer? Longer term, if the short-term stuff, if doing those things doesn't help, and you just can't get to a place of mental resilience and things don't get better, go see your doctor. We talked about health being an issue with mental resilience. So you got to check with your doctor and make sure there's not something going on and your thyroid isn't acting up. So all of a sudden you're sluggish and depressed, and that's impairing your decisions. But if nothing medical is wrong, if you're good, then, and actually all the time we need to be monitoring ourselves, we need to think about stress and where we are with regard to stress. Now I know nobody in here experiences any stress whatsoever, right? It's, my biggest stress this whole year was watching Georgia lose. We all live with lots of stress. Chronic stress is the enemy of mental resilience. It is the worst thing that can happen for your good decision making. So you need to know your enemy. So let's think about stress for a minute. People use the word a lot. Stress is just when you've got a situation and its demands are more than the resources you've got to handle it in the moment. You're being asked to do something or think about something or resolve something, and you just don't have the resources in the moment to do what needs to be done. Not all stress is bad. Can anybody think of an example of good stress? Like really there is such a thing as good stress. A deadline, yes, exactly. How many of you have kids in high school or have had kids in high school in your life? That having them have a deadline, be a little anxious about that SAT exam or whatever, motivates them to perform more. So a deadline is a good kind of stress because it can motivate you. But then there's the bad stress, and that's the stuff that is chronic, that can make you sick. That's the stuff we need to worry about. I learned, or I sort of got my aha moment about this when actually I was at this conference 2 years ago, and I was talking about stress, and someone came up to me afterwards and said, "Anna, are you a witch?" And I think I was a little offended, but I'm like, "What?" And he said, "'Cause unless you can control the weather, you can't do anything about my stress." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I see where you're going with this." So it's really important to think about stressors. Weather is a stressor. Can't do anything about weather. Wish I could control the weather. We can't control the weather, but we can control how our body responds to stress so it doesn't kill us. That's what stress management and dealing with chronic stress is. Not that you have a perfect life and all the stress goes away, because that doesn't happen, but that you learn skills so that it doesn't eat away at you and grind you down and make you sick. So the witch story taught me that that's an important distinction to make. Because chronic stress is awful. It does really bad things to you that you're not even aware of. Everybody knows about adrenaline, and you feel that with stress. But there's another hormone called cortisol that actually can impact your brain structure. And if you have chronic stress for too long, different parts of your brain start to shrink. Your hippocampus changes size. It affects your physical systems. How many of you know somebody with high blood pressure in farming? Does anybody know someone, not know someone in farming with high blood pressure? Blood pressure, stroke, your immune system, you just get sick more often because it's suppressed. It affects your emotional systems, depression and anxiety, and your brain stops being your friend because you're not thinking clearly and it's giving you messages that are not useful. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the specifics of that. Stress and thinking. Stress actually damages the parts of your brain that have to do with memory. So you forget stuff. And I don't know if you can see this cartoon, but this feels like my life these days. This person's got a box of things and he's talking to his brain and says, "Can you hang on to this thought for me?" And the brain's like, "Yeah, sure." And 60 seconds later, it's like, "Hey, I'm back." And the brain's already set that thought on fire. Memory gets shredded. Mistakes, cognitive failures is the fancy word for mistakes, increase, and brain fog, that feeling that you just can't think through things, that increases with chronic stress. Attention, your ability to focus and your ability to respond quickly decreases with chronic stress. As does selective attention, and by that I mean your ability to just focus on one thing at a time and not get distracted by the phone ringing and the 18 other things that are going on, is decreased with stress, as is spatial navigation. And what that means is that your sense of space is damaged so that you can't navigate through space. You don't know where you are in space. It makes you clumsier. Which is really problematic when you think about handling a lot of equipment. So all these things happen because of stress, and it makes you misjudge risks, which is a really scary one for decision making. People who are under chronic stress are more comfortable taking higher risks. They don't see situations as risky as they really are, and they're not as scared of losing. The loss aversion is decreased. So you take more risks when you're under chronic stress that may or may not be based on sound decisions. Okay? Problem solving is messed up with stress. You don't have as much creativity and flexibility. And your body stops being able to shut down the stress response. It becomes this sort of negative spiral. And it actually can prevent new neuron growth in your brain. So it's all that stuff that happens with chronic stress. So as you're thinking about this, of all the things a producer does, where's the places where chronic stress is going to put a producer at risk of those things that we were talking about? What do you think are some of the places where that might happen? I used to teach a lot, so I'm just going to start calling on people. If you don't make eye contact with me, or I'll call on you. What about equipment? That's one that strikes me a lot, that if you don't have fast reflexes and you don't have a good sense of where you are in space, how do you manage heavy equipment? How do you stay safe? How do you look at a contract and understand what it says and know whether it's the right thing to do to engage in this business decision or not if you don't know about risk and you can't focus as well? What else? Anything else that strikes you? Yes, ma'am. Employee response. How do you respond to employees when you don't have as much patience, when you're not thinking as clearly, maybe when your communication isn't as good? Yes, that's a really good example. So all of these things are negatively impacted by stress, and it can really hurt your business. The flip side of it is if you can manage this gives you a competitive advantage because most people don't manage this. So what do? The first thing is prevention, which you do before a particular stressor happens. You just do this all the time. The best defense is a good offense. And I use the acronym SAFER. Try to get enough sleep. I know there are times in your life where you can't, but as much as possible, trying to get some regular sleep. Try to be aware of your stress level. Like, as you're driving somewhere, it's like, how am I feeling? Am I tense? How is my stress level? Because sometimes you have so much of it, you're not even aware of it anymore. Really focusing on the positive. There's a lot of research that shows that remembering to be grateful in the moment. Things are really horrible, things are bleak, but people have their family, people have their faith, people have their community, and to just think about something to be grateful for every day can really reduce stress and is a really positive activity to be doing. Eat well and drink water. I have a friend who's a therapist in Minnesota, and she works exclusively with farmers. And during harvest, when a farmer comes to see her, the first thing she asks is, when was the last time you had something to drink that wasn't a Red Bull or a beer? And usually the answer is 3 or 4 days. So water and food. And this is a pet peeve of mine, but those stupid orange peanut butter crackers, that's not food. That doesn't count as a meal. So please be thinking about what can you eat that is somewhat healthy, and how do you drink enough water? And then finally, reach out. And by that, I mean, talk to somebody. Maybe you have a spouse, maybe you have a friend, maybe you have a pastor, someone that you can talk to and just say, God, this has been an awful day. Can I vent for 3 minutes? Or can I bounce some ideas off of you? It's really important to have that network, to have a peer network that you can talk with. Also, know that, and I know not everybody here is from Georgia, but in Georgia at least, UGA Extension is really committed to well-being in farmers. And that's not just your A&R agent giving you information on soil testing or giving you information on pesticides or whatever. We care about all of you holistically and your family. So we want you to take care of your family, take care of your farm, and take care of yourself because you are the most important asset on your farm. A lot of times I'll ask people, what's the most valuable asset on your farm? And they tell me things about combines and stuff. It's like, no, it's you, because there's no farm without the farmer. So you are the most important asset on your farm, and we have lots and lots of resources. So I encourage you to reach out for them. Another piece of prevention is proactive coping, like getting yourself ready ahead of time when you know there's going to be stressors. Building your resources ahead of time, information and people, thinking about when are going to be the high stressful times and identifying those stressors and being ready ahead of time. Again, this is the best defense is a good offense. Fight the stressor before it comes. There are certain times of the year that are more stressful. Get yourself ready. There's another one, and this sounds weird, but it really is scientifically proven. It's called neuroplasticity. And I know it sounds like you have a plastic brain, but that's not what it means. Neuroplasticity, that means no matter how old you are, you can still grow your brain. Literally, physically, you can make new neuron connections in your brain, and that helps you think more clearly and make better decisions. And there's exercises you can do, just like you exercise your muscles. Learn a second language. I know that's kind of difficult for some people, but there's this thing called Duolingo on your phone, and it's free, and you can learn it in 2 and 10-minute increments in the car. It helps with your memory. My personal favorite, take a nap. Taking a nap actually has been shown to help with memory. It consolidates your memory. It helps you think more clearly. And then just do stuff you don't normally do. Try to do some things with your non-dominant hand. Like not dangerous things, don't hammer with your non-dominant hand, but just try and write with your non-dominant hand. Do routine things differently. Do puzzles or read or word searches or anything that's going to use your brain in a different way, because it's going to grow the cells in your brain, which will help you think more clearly. Okay. And then there's good old-fashioned coping. How are we going to cope with the stress when it's here? Well, not all coping strategies are created equal. There's really 3 big categories. Problem-oriented ones are where you deal with the stressor, and you think about, okay, here it is, what are we going to do? And that is shown to be more effective than emotion-oriented strategies, which are the ones where you just talk yourself out of it, and somebody tells you to just be cheerful. Shifting your emotions isn't really as effective as actually dealing with the problem. And then the worst is avoidant-oriented. For those of you who remember Gone with the Wind and Scarlett O'Hara, I'll think about it tomorrow. That doesn't really work very well at all as a way to manage stress. As I said before, though, sometimes there isn't a solution to the problem. It is what it is. So if you can't manage the problem, you can manage your stress response. You can manage what's happening in your body. Using all those prevention strategies that I mentioned earlier. But then there's also some other ones. There's cognitive strategies. Remember I said your brain is not your friend when you get really stressed? When you get really stressed, your brain does this thing called cognitive distortions. One thing goes bad, and you immediately go to, I'm a failure, I can't do anything right. Or something happens that's negative financially, and you immediately go to, oh my God, I'm losing the farm. That all or nothing thinking, that distortion thinking, that's stress messing up your brain. But if you can stop and look at it, you can reframe it. You can go, oh, I'm doing a cognitive distortion. I'm not thinking clearly now. That's not true. Just because this thing happened doesn't mean that I am always for my entire life a failure. That's not how it works. And you can talk yourself through it. And this is a skill, you can learn this. There's a lot of books out there. I gave you a couple of names, Cognitive Distortions. It came out of the Beck Institute, and I know you can't see this here, but this is just some examples, and so you'll have that in your handouts also, of how you think, looking at your thoughts and then changing them to make them healthier. So you can make your brain your friend again. Another one is what's called mindfulness. All that means is being still for a minute and paying attention to the moment. You're in the middle of the chaos. Before you go into the house at night, stand outside your door, take a deep breath, and for 30 seconds appreciate the color of the sky and that you've got a house to go into, and just be, and be still without any judgment. You can do this anywhere. This is not, I have to pull out a yoga mat and do meditation. This is just breathing and being appreciative. And breathing really helps. There's actually research that shows that diaphragmatic breathing, that stuff where you breathe really deeply from here, hold it for the count of 5, and exhale again, lowers your blood pressure. So if you can do that, and these are the kind of things you can do at the stoplight when you're driving somewhere. Napping again, yay. Listening to music. Somebody actually did a study that showed that if you listen to classical music, you were less stressed than if you listened to grunge rock. I was shocked. Who thought? Yes. But whatever music works for you, for some people it's hymns, for other people it's, I can't go wrong with Tim McGraw. Whatever works for you, listen to music. And there's actually also apps. There's one called Calm that I use sometimes that you can do to help you manage stress when you're in the middle of a stressful moment. So, to summarize, chronic stress is the enemy of mental resilience. And without mental resilience, you do not have a competitive edge in business. Prevention can help protect your mental resilience and keep it from getting harmed. You can do things like SAFER. You can build your neuroplasticity. But sometimes stress happens. So when you recognize chronic stress, problem solve it if you can. Turn your brain back into your friend. Breathe and take a minute and try one of those relaxation things like listening to music or learning a language, because you can protect and restore your mental resilience. It just takes being intentional, and it really only takes a little time. It just takes a couple of minutes. And you can, as a result, be much sharper and have the competitive advantage of mental resilience. If you're interested in this and you want to learn more, I do a weekly blog that you can sign up for there. Extension has a very extensive mental well-being site with all sorts of information. And anybody who ever has a question about this can always contact me. That's my email there. And the last thing is, you are worth these efforts. Some people blow this stuff up. No, you are worth it. You work hard, you deserve it. You deserve to have mental resilience and have a competitive edge and be able to take advantage of these things. And so with that, I say thank you, and I'll close this out. And I'll take any questions that people might have. Do we have any questions? This is a hard one to ask questions about sometimes.
I got one.
Yes.
Look at the middle of the night.
Okay.
Can't sleep because I'm thinking about work, thinking about customers, thinking about everything else. So I'll play a game on my iPad for 30 minutes. And then sometimes I can go back to sleep, sometimes I don't. My wife says, get off the iPad, that's why you can't get back to sleep. I tell her I can't get back to sleep if I don't get on it. So you tell me who's right. She's not here.
Yeah, but she's a woman. Okay, so I'm supposed to be repeating the questions. The gentleman was saying he can't sleep. Sometimes he gets up and he plays on his iPad for half an hour as a way to get back to sleep. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. His wife says the iPad and being on a screen is the problem. And I'm supposed to tell you who in your marriage is right. This is a setup. There is research that shows that looking at the blue lights that come out of a computer screen wake you up more. So in that sense, she might be right. But in the sense of I'm lying in bed and I'm staring at the ceiling and I can't stop thinking, getting up and doing something is the best thing you can do. So you're both right. But if you don't want to do a screen, I know people who have a notebook and they just get up and they list out everything they're worried about and they list out everything that they don't want to forget for tomorrow. And sometimes just putting it down on paper means you can let it go a little bit and go back to sleep. There you go. You can also get glasses that filter out the blue light so you can play your game on your iPad and tell your wife to hush because it filters out the light. That works too. There you go. I love it. Marriage Counseling 101. Here we are. Other questions? Oh my goodness, I've never known a group to be shy. All right, if there are no other questions, I'll stop for now. I'll say thank you. I will also do 2 quick plugs. One is we have a booth at the bottom of the stairs, Rural Georgia Growing Stronger, where we have a bunch of resources. You've got copies of some of them there. We also have stress bones and chocolate, which I didn't list as a stress reducer, but firmly believe is a big one. And behind your handouts is a quick evaluation. And anybody who brings it back to the bottom of the table, I will give you as many squishy bones and chocolate as you want, because we need this information. And with that, I will say thank you very much. Okay. I will pass it on to our speaker. We're really lucky that we've got Emma Swainston, who is a family business advisor from the Pinion Group. And she's going to talk about creating a generational roadmap, how to help guide the future of your family and the family farm. Hope in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Anna, and for everything she spoke on. It's definitely a topic that's been coming up more and more as I go throughout my work working with family stress and the causes of stress and how we can help our family. I saw a lot of people leave, so I'm going to assume all those people have no problems in their family business, right? You guys are the only ones that have problems, right? I mean, it's not our family, it's other people. So I have to be really honest before I get started today. I am standing in front of you today as a person that has lived through everything I'm going to talk about today. You see, I grew up on a small farm. Oh, how do I get this to work? Is there one button I can click?
When I just did this.
No, enter. Okay. So I grew up on a small farm in Indiana. Do I have any Hoosiers in here? No? Yes. Hoosier in the back. Oh, yes. So I grew up on a small farm in Indiana, row crop. We dairied, milked Jersey cows. And this quote sums me up perfectly. People protect what they love what they understand, and then they understand what they are taught. And growing up, my dad taught me everything about farming. Taught me how to drive a tractor. Taught me how to check the seed depth when we're planting our crops. And because of him, I grew to love agriculture, and I knew that no matter what I did in my life, it was going to be in agriculture. And so I go back to the farm, and I'm working with him. And as much as I love the farm, I realized that it wasn't going to be my forever journey. I still farm with him. I still help him out. We have future plans of things that will shift throughout time. But I also realized I love talking to family farms and talking to them about the problems that they have because I've lived through it myself. And so, like she mentioned, I am a family business advisor with Pinion. We're an advisory and accounting firm. We work with mainly food and ag customers all over the country. And so we can help you with farm service agents programs, of course, tax and accounting, HR, payroll, anything you need help with, we like to say we can find a solution for it. My team specifically works all over the country with families to help them through their transitioning of management and estate planning. But I have a question for you guys. Why are you guys in the fruit and vegetable business? It's kind of a dumb question, but have you ever thought about it? Like, why are you in the fruit and vegetable business? Why are you here today trying to learn and to grow your business? Okay, because this is a key to why we're here. Because if you don't have a reason for being in the business, you don't have a purpose or a value, you could go work somewhere else. You could go find another job, find a boss. We all have a reason for being here, so think about that today as we talk and as you go throughout your whole weekend. We all come here today, though, with different stages of our business. And so before I kind of get into what I call like the meat of my presentation, I like to give a basis of just what a good family business does and how before they put their roadmap together, what are the skills that they need? And so the first thing we usually talk about with our clients are the life cycle of a family business. So you can see at the bottom, we start with survival mode. You guys probably all know farms that are in survival mode or the beginning of how your farm started. It's a one-person operator. They're just plugging along, trying to make it work. There's a lot of sweat equity that goes into this, right? They're barely surviving. But after some years of profitability, maybe they've brought on the next generation. Maybe they've even hired an employee at this point. They're in that stable mode. Okay, they're starting to grow the business, starting to get a little bigger, a little better. And then you can see a jump from stable to professional. At this point, you're getting into multiple generations that are owning the farm. This is what we call it the cousin consortium. At this point, you've gone from just maybe siblings owning it together to now you have cousins. And this is where we see a lot of conflict, right? When you get cousins that have grown up in different households, they kind of have different values, different views of the farm or the business. They're gonna have strife and they're gonna have conflict as they come into managing it together. And then lastly, you see institutional. So this is, think of your Cargills of the ag world. They're just massive companies that at this point today, the family's not running the day-to-day. They're not in management, but they are there pulling a dividend and income. Maybe some of them are still working there, but for the most part, it's just a massive corporate company. And so think about, where is your business on this journey? Where do you hope to go in the future? A lot of times we find we're working with clients right in that stable to professional mode, right? They've been profitable, they've done well, they've brought on the next generation or looking to bring on the next generation, but they got to get a little more professional, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Some of the things that we can do to be a little more professional that will help us throughout our journey. And you'll see those arrows that come off. So some of those exits, think of those as voluntary or involuntary, right? Sometimes people are forced out of business, right? Maybe that's markets. I know with fruit and vegetable, it can be markets, it can be weather, it can be a number of things that are out of our control. But maybe there's a time where it comes where you say, you know what, I've loved the job I've done, I've grown a business, my next generation wants to take it to professional, and I don't really want to go professional. I don't want a boss. I don't want to have to clock in and clock out. And so they voluntarily exit the business. Think about that, because at some point everyone's going to exit the business. What is your exit going to be? Is it voluntary? Will it be involuntary at some point? But it will be coming. And so as you work in the business with your family, there's 3 circles we like to talk about. You have management, ownership, and family. And you guys can think about this. You guys probably already know this as you work through your business. You're taking management decisions every day. How do you manage your farm? What seeds are we planting? What tractor are we buying this year? And then you have your owners. So those are the people that own the ground, own the assets. Maybe you have an investor. Maybe you have some non-family members that are owners in the business, or off the farm family members that are owners. And then lastly, you have your family. So that's the relationships that bind the family together, right? Brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever that may be. Now you see the 3 circles overlap. Do you think that overlap brings out rainbows and sunshine? Unfortunately, it doesn't usually, and that's why I have a job, okay? There's a lot of conflict and confusion that can come from this. This is where, making decisions about what tractor to buy with your brother gets iffy, right? Or making a decision about what rent we're gonna pay for a field that maybe your mom or your dad owns can get tricky. You're trying to navigate that conversation. Okay, so think about going through a day on the farm. You wake up. I have to be candid. I'm a grain farmer from my background and my education. So if I say things that sound more grainy, I'm not as versed in the fruit and vegetable industry. But say you wake up, you go into work. You have a management meeting in the morning. You're working with your team, and you're wearing your manager hat. You're divvying out, your jobs, the roles for the day. And then you go and you sit back down at your desk, and your daughter comes up, who also works in the business, and she starts talking to you about a birthday party that's happening that weekend for your granddaughter. Now you're wearing your mom hat. Okay, so I want you guys to think about, when you go through your business, what hat are you wearing? Are you wearing the right hat for the conversation you're having? Sometimes if we get tricky with what we're wearing, what we're talking about, we're not telling the whole story of the business, right? And a big saying that my team loves to harp on is, in the absence of a story, people will make one up. Okay, if you're not telling the whole story to the owners, they're probably making one up, and I promise you it's not the same story that you're making up, or the truth. So think about that. In the absence of a story, people make one up. You want to be clear and concise about what you're talking about so everyone's on the same page. Now, when we talk about being on the same page, I'm not here to tell you that by the end of a meeting, everyone's going to agree to the same exact thing. We're all going to agree to A, B, and C. But certainty can be as valuable as agreement. So you want people to be in the meeting together, to be in these talks and discussions, and you want them to understand the expectations. You can see up here it talks about, if people understand the expectations, and let's think about this as your next generation coming back, that's kind of the focus today, right? They're more likely to meet them, less likely to be conflicted over lack of clarity and fairness, and they're more likely to attract them to join. Okay, so if you're talking to your son or your daughter or whatever, niece, nephew that's thinking of coming back to the farm, and they have no idea what's expected of them, how are they expected to come back? If they have no clue what the job's going to be, what education they need, if they have to go work somewhere else first, it's less likely that they'll come back. And so we're going to talk through some of the things the expectations that we need to fill out for everyone to understand. I'm not here to talk to you guys about the technical side of problems, right? I'm not going to tell you what tractor to buy next year. I'm not going to tell you what seed variety to put in the ground. We're going to talk about adaptive challenges, if you see up there. And so those are a little more difficult to identify, although easy to deny. Ironic, right? Those are things like, no, we don't have problems in our family. We know what's happening. But really, when you dig down into it, you can see that there's conflict between the generations. Okay, this is going to require changes in your values, your beliefs, in multiple places in the business. And often people will resist acknowledging that they even have challenges, right? You're just going to resist. I'll be honest, this is an example that I can see in my own parents. They have 7 kids, 6 girls, 1 boy. They're very blessed. But they have a lot of challenges of not talking to all of us. About half of us know what's going on. And so that's something that they're just like, it's okay. They don't need, it's not a worry. And it really is. It's hard for them to really identify that that's a problem, that everyone needs to be kept in the loop. And the solutions require experiments and new discoveries. So this is not something, and kind of leads into my next slide, this is not an event. You're not going to sit down after this conference and decide the whole future of the farm for the next generation in one sitting and be done. This is planning is a process. And so if you see our decision-making model up here, planning and action, you guys probably do every day on your farm. You make a decision, you take action. Of course, we all do that. We do that every day. You know, Anna talked about all the decisions we have to make, and you have to act on them and get work done. But do you come over to the right side of the circle? Are you reflecting on the actions that you take? Are you looking back at them and some of the assumptions maybe you made to see, are those right or wrong assumptions? Was I actually right or not? And when you come down here, you see mutual education, I knowledge to we knowledge. And we really like to work with our families on this because sometimes one generation has the knowledge about something, but have they made the decision and acted upon it and reflected with the entire family so everyone knows what that decision is going to be? If only one person knows it, is it really good knowledge to have in the farm? So as you go through the decision-making model and you make decisions on the farm and you keep everyone in the loop and you reflect upon things, you'll be confirmed, right? And you'll make that knowledge confirmed, and you'll come from I knowledge to we knowledge. And the last thing that I always harp on my families to have is trust. Everyone needs to have trust with everyone they do business with, right? And just like Anna recommended books, I could recommend a dozen books to you if you're a reader. This is a great one, The Speed of Trust by Covey. And he talks about, is your business paying a trust tax, or are you earning a trust dividend? And so if you see his equation up here, he talks about every interaction you have, every communication, every project you work on, every new adventure you do as a family on a farm. It's affecting the trust in your business. And if you're getting a trust dividend, right, that trust is being earned and growing and positive, then the speed of your business is faster and the cost of it is less or decreases. But if you're paying a trust tax, then the speed slows down, then the cost goes up. Think about that. Especially in agriculture, a lot of times we're making decisions based on weather, right? And if we're not trusting as a team about the decisions we're making of when to plant a field or when to harvest, it's taking us more time to make those decisions, and it's going to cost us more. Maybe it costs us in yield. Maybe it costs us in time that it takes us to harvest because of weather, you know. So with the lack of trust, you're negatively or positively affecting your business every day. And when there's a lack of trust, you can see down in the bottom here, it talks about we assume acts are malicious. So if you're not trusting the people you're working with, when you have a misunderstanding, you're not sure about a point you've talked about, a decision that's made, instead of seeking out understanding and going and talking to them about that decision, you're just going to sit by yourself and you're going to think that was an act of maliciousness, right? You're not going to want to go out to them and talk to them and reach out to them because your trust is not there. So make sure you have trust in your business. And like Covey said, every interaction can be moving that needle up or down. And so positive interactions, positive projects are going to help that. And so our next slide is where I really get into the beliefs of your farm and as you bring on the next generation. And so these are our guiding principles. It's one of my favorite things. I actually stole it from my colleague. It's so good. And so we teach it to a lot of people we work with. What do you believe about your family, your wealth, and your business? And so I'm going to go over a couple examples so you guys can understand what I'm talking about. You'll see one of the first ones there. Those that are working the business should own it, or my assets should be owned by my heirs regardless of their involvement. And so is that a conversation you've had on your business or in your family? Are assets only owned by the heirs that are involved? Or are off-farm heirs allowed to have ownership? Think about that. There's some up there about in-laws. What's the view on in-laws? Are in-laws allowed to own? Are they allowed to be in the discussion or not? One I'll really touch on is on the bottom left here. It says, any family member can come back, or only those that pursue additional education, work somewhere else for a while, and have a skill set that fits our business needs have a place here. And so this is something that I'll advocate and I'll advise everyone that I work with to do. Have a policy in place as you think about the next generation. Have a guiding principle for your family and your farm about what's expected of the next generation. Are you saying anyone in the family can come back and work whenever they need a job? It's here, no matter what. Or do you require them to have additional education at some point? Do you require them to work somewhere else for a while? We advocate and advise every family to actually send their kids to go work somewhere else. Think about it. If your kids can go work somewhere else, work for another boss that's not their mom or dad or their cousin or their brother, they can get along with employees in another business. They're going to bring so much skill and value back to your business. They're going to bring best practices back. Is there a conversation to be had that in the future the farm needs more help with maybe regulations and certifications in the fruit and vegetable industry? They need to go out and get those because that's the future of what the farm needs. And so think about your guiding principles. I have a handout. If you, the conference has it, and they'll email it out too, I think, when they share all of the recordings and everything from the conference. But you can print out that worksheet and look at it with your family and see what are the guiding principles of your family, because that really leads us into the step of bringing on that next generation. And often they're principles that are honestly already on the farm that probably aren't being articulated or discussed. An example for my own farm actually is 2 of our farms are 100-year-old farms. They're about 120 years old at this point, being in my family only. And the unique thing about those farms is they're actually passed down through the female heirs of the family. So my dad doesn't own the ground, even though he's the one that farms it. My mom owns it. And it will continue to be passed down to the females, because you remember I have 5 sisters. So there's plenty of us to take it over. But that is, I would say, a guiding principle of my family farm, is that these 2 pieces of ground are passed down to the female heirs. Not something we've written down or put into law. It could always change if it needed to, but it's a principle that's guided my family now for over 100 years. So think about that. And now a little bit of participation. How many of you guys, if you're willing to raise your hand, how many of you guys actually have a family employment policy in place? Like it's written out, typed out? No one? Okay, that's okay. Maybe one, okay. And so here's some components of that policy, and we're going to talk about some of them. But think about, on a scale from 1 to 10, how clear are your kids on their expectations of coming back to the farm? Okay? And I want you to even think of it almost as a sliding scale. I like to think when they're young, they should be down at that 1, 2, 3 number, right? Maybe when they're young, there's statements of, yes, son, this could be yours one day, or yes, son, one day you can decide what variety to plant here, or whatever. And as they get older, they get through high school, they start going to college, we want that number to be a 10. We want them to know exactly what's expected of them. And especially the 2 we like to point out are compensation and path to ownership. I'll say right now, path to ownership is one, I think, is what brings a lot of calls to my team and myself. There's a lot of kids that get back to the farm. They'll be there for about 10-ish years. There's no real path, or no one's talking about what ownership will be like for them in the future, but they've put 10 years of work into the farm, and so they call me saying, you know, you got to make my mom and dad do something. They're not doing anything. And so it's not always a great conversation to have, but it does get things moving and talking, and sometimes we can work it out, and sometimes we can't, unfortunately. But path to ownership, if they know that before they even come back, it really clears up a lot of expectations. And so the first thing when you're considering hiring family members, there's a few things I'm gonna point out. Family members must meet the same criteria for hire or fire as a non-family applicant. So just like anyone you're going to hire on your farm, just because their name might be on the tractor or the crate of apples or oranges, whatever, they need to meet the same criteria. You don't want to hire someone just because they're your child or they're your nephew or niece or whatever the relation may be. They need to have the same criteria. And that's where setting these expectations at the beginning will help them meet that. They'll know what's expected of them before the time comes. Don't hire someone you can't fire. If you don't feel like in the future you could fire your son, you know, we always tell people going in from the beginning, have a plan of, and we'll talk about it in a minute, you know, what's the plan of if you have to exit? Don't hire someone you can't fire. That's another call that's not fun to get. I haven't gotten one personally, but my colleagues have all dealt with having to help fire children, and it's not fun conversations to have. And lastly, establish a probationary period. And this is one that from personal experience, like I said, I'm standing up here as an example of this. This is something I'm grateful I had with my family. So after graduating college, I went out west into college and worked with Extension for a while and worked in various places. And I went back to my family farm and worked with my parents for about 3 or 4 years full time. And we got to a point where my husband and I both decided, as much as we love the farm, we didn't want it to be our only job 100%. You know, future, we wanted to go and have careers. And so I am grateful that we established a probationary period. So from day one, we had a plan of my path to ownership, but none of it had started yet. We both agreed we wanted a few years to make sure we both liked it. We both wanted to continue. We could both work together, right? And I'm grateful for that because after 3 years, I didn't have to try and divvy up land or worry about assets. I can walk away easily. I still work on the farm with him today and help make management decisions and do things. And there will be a path to where I'm going to probably own it one day. But right now, I'm glad that it wasn't something that deterred me from going the direction I wanted to go. So it's always good to have a probationary period, no matter what you do, to not really set things in stone from day one, because you never know what will happen. And so you're ready to hire them, you're ready to bring them back. Maybe they're getting ready to graduate from college, maybe they went off and worked the off-farm job you told them, or off-family farm job you told them they had to take. And so you're ready to bring them back. And this is where you have to work on your job description. And this is, family farms love to just say, you're ready to come back to us, right? Come work for us again. And they just bring them back, and they don't talk about what their roles and their responsibilities will be. You really want to put it in writing because it makes things more certain, and it makes things, again, everyone knows the expectations. And so their skills experience needed is a big one we like to harp on, because if you're expecting them to come back with, you know, a 4-year degree, but you didn't tell them that when they went to college and they dropped out after 3 to go work on a ranch in a state, 3 states away, then they haven't met your requirements. Also, unusual working conditions. This is one I see nowadays. We like to make sure the next generation knows what they're coming into. Are they going to be expected to work weekends, right? I mean, sure they are, but let's spell that out for them so that 2-3 years down the road, they're not feeling like they're getting used or not having enough downtime. Making sure we spell out what's required of them for their job, just like if they were to go work for anybody else, is important. A saying I like to, and I'll kind of finish with it later, but recognize the value of being a family business, but don't act as if you are one, right? This is a point where I'm not trying to make you go corporate. I know it can sound corporate-y what we talk about sometimes, but putting some of these in place is really where you will stop the conflict and the confusion to come up later on. And so compensation is a big one, of course. How are you going to pay them? How much are you going to pay them? And so 2 things to think about are, what's the going rate or a similar salary for the area around you? You want to be competitive to what's around you. You don't have to pay them a certain amount, but if you want to just say, okay, this is the market value for your position as you come back. This is what you'll pay you. Eventually, you'll get more with ownership or whatever. But also think about, what are those fringe benefits, right, on a farm that we don't talk about? Are they getting a truck? Are they getting access to a gas tank? Are they getting half a cow or whatever? And put values to those and put them on paper so everyone can see that number. Because it's hard if you bring back a child and you set a salary and you pay them. 2 years later, they come back to you and say, I can't even survive off this. I'm only getting paid X amount of dollars. And you can look at them and say, yes, you're getting X, but you're also getting X, Y, and Z from the fringe benefits. And this is what the farm can handle right now. So spelling those out will really help to mitigate issues with compensation. And so it's time to interview them. Again, not trying to be corporate-y with you guys, but one thing I will say about this is you want to have more than one person interview them. And this could be just another key employee on your farm. It could be a manager. But having another person interview them, right, it takes that family farm. Don't act as if you're one all the time. So this is where it becomes a real job. Maybe who's their future supervisor going to be? If it's not you, maybe that person can interview them as well. They get to ask questions. They get to learn their skills. They get to make sure they're going to be a right fit for the team and know what's expected of them. Okay? And so let's think about this. You've made a job description. You've talked to your kid about it. By the time they got to high school and college, they're a 10 out of 10. Everyone knows the plan of what's expected of them, how to come back on the farm. You've interviewed them. They're coming back. And now the dreaded question of, how do we get management for us to go from one generation to the next? And so this is a chart that we work with our clients a lot. You can put down, so on the right-hand or left-hand side, you can write down all your tasks or the decisions that have to be made for the farm. Make a column for each person in the farm, and then you're going to put these letters underneath. So R is for who's responsible for that. Who's going to complete that task or make sure and manage the task that it comes to completion. C is who's consulted by that decision. Okay, so who needs to have input on that decision, but maybe is not the one actually doing it, doing the physical work. And I is informed, so who's just going to be affected by it and should be kept informed of the decision going forward. And so if you make this chart, when you first bring on your children or the next generation, you can kind of just get a visual representation of like who's got the most R's, who's responsible for the most work. And at first, that's probably going to be, right, mom and dad, right? Whatever managing, generation is in charge. And I like to tell my clients, like, make this chart every maybe 6 months to a year, annually maybe, and see how those letters change. Maybe have a goal. Maybe you chart it out and there's 30 really big tasks for the farm that you're gonna track. And on year 1, dad's in charge of 25 of them, right? He's doing a lot. He's responsible for them and he's completing them. Maybe by year 1 you say, okay, we're going to take 5 of those tasks in year 1 and move them completely off dad. So maybe the next generation takes that over, your son or your daughter. They're responsible, but maybe for a few years they're still consulting their dad or their mom about them, right? So they haven't totally taken over that 100%. They're still getting the consultation, right? To make sure they're doing the work right, making the right decisions. But you want to see how that transitions over time because, the worst thing is to come when your dad comes to you one day and says, hey, son, I'm ready to retire. I want to get out of this. But your son isn't even prepared. He doesn't know how to do half the things on the farm, right? There's always some things that dad or mom are storing in the back of their brain, right? Think moms usually do the books. Like, is someone ready to do the books when she's ready to retire? Probably not. So an example from my farm, when I went back, my dad also has a couple hog barns, and ordering and feed. You got to order and feed to get delivered from the feed mill. And so that was something that we identified when we first went back. My dad was in control of it. He was responsible for it. And he taught me over the first year kind of how to do it, the timing, right, meeting the right people and understanding who to call when it was time. And so by year 2, I was doing it, but I was still consulting him. And I'm grateful for that transition, right? He didn't just pass it off and say, here you go. It was like, okay, I think it's time. I climbed the bin, I looked, we're about 3/4, the truck will be here in 2 days. You got to work it right. And so that was a great one to have him consult me on, because there were times where I was ready to make a decision and he said, wait, hold up, there's a holiday weekend coming, or maybe these pigs are about to finish and they move out in a week, they're not going to eat as much, whatever the case may be. And so this chart's a great way to make sure that you're not passing off responsibilities before someone's not ready for them, but they're still being consulted on them so they can. And so as you go through this chart and as you go through the years of working together, you're passing off management roles, they're taking over more responsibility. Mom and dad are slowing down a little bit. One thing we really, is a focus is you want to make sure you're still giving them training and developing them. And this is something my team and I, besides helping families do their transitioning and estate planning and helping them through management conversations, we also do peer groups, and that's one way that you could get your next generation to learn and to grow. You can also do technical stuff. I'm sure you guys, as you walk the floor of the trade show, you guys can see different trainings and certifications they can get through. There's Extension. Extension has so many good, valuable trainings you can do. You can do things like the Covey books and reading things, but think of ways like, how are you training the next generation? They can learn so much on the farm, but in our day and age, there's technology, there's stresses coming from every direction. They're probably the only one in their community taking on the responsibility that you're giving them, right? Not every neighbor is passing off a farm to their son at the same time, or their daughter. And so where are they getting that support, and where they can be trained and developed for the next generation? And so you're ready to pass it off. We call this the awkward generational dance, right? Like, no one knows who's going first. Do we wait for them to be ready? Do they come to us and kind of step on our toes a little bit when we're not ready to pass on yet? So what I'll say on this is, think back to everything we talked about, right? You have trust in the business, every interaction being positive. You have a planning circle, right? Coming back together, making sure everyone's turning that I knowledge that they have themselves into we knowledge for the whole group to have. And so you'll see at the bottom there, it says growing competence to have confidence. You want to grow the competence in the whole team, both generations, both sides, so that when the time does come to have that generational awkward dance, time to pass it on, you have the confidence in them, right? Like I said, if dad comes and says, hey, I'm ready to be done now, or I'm ready to be done in 1 or 2 or 5 years, whatever it may be, you want to make sure you have the confidence in each other that you've passed on the management correctly, you've prepared the assets right, so that you can pass it on, and you're not gonna, you're not gonna kind of blow up the family business in a transition. And so, one thing before I kind of start to close out, I wanted to point on this. We talk a lot about the next generation and how are we bringing them on the farm? How are we hiring them? What's their best practices? How can we bring them on without causing so many issues or problems? But one thing we love to talk to about is letting go, kind of the concerns for the older generation as they let go and they move on from the farm. And so you see we have an iceberg up here, and as you guys probably have heard before, icebergs are about 20% you can see above water, 80% is usually underwater that you can't see. And so it's easily identified. People are going to wonder, well, how, when I leave the farm, how am I going to pay for my life? Do I have enough money? Do I have my assets set up right that I can pull dividends or payments off of, or rent, whatever that may be? Of course, I'm worried about the next group. Are they prepared and ready to lead the farm? Do they have the knowledge they need? But there's a lot of things we talk about or that we don't talk about that aren't vocalized. And that's where we come in and we talk with our families a lot about, as we see these transitionings coming, are you vocalizing your concerns? Are you worried the business won't survive without you? Are you worried about what the family will look like when you leave the farm, the business, right? There's going to be some differences. Maybe you were always there on Wednesday afternoons for lunch with the whole team, and maybe you won't do that anymore now that you're not working in the business, or you're not always in the office seeing everyone like you used to. And how's that going to feel, and how does that affect family? And lastly, your identity. So that generation that's ready to pass the farm on, who are they going to be after they're not running a farm anymore? Have you guys thought about that, right? Have you guys thought about when I'm not in charge of making every day-to-day decision of the farm, what am I going to do? Who am I going to be? I know that's a conversation I have with my own dad. You know, Dad, at some point, he doesn't think so, but at some point, you're not going to be able to get in the tractor. You're not going to be the one making all the decisions. You're going to pass them on to us. Like, what are you going to do? And we like to talk about it in what is the next mountain to climb? So think about you've climbed this mountain to build your farm to a success. You can say maybe the climax is that you built it so successfully you to pass it to the next generation if that was your goal. But you're going to come down that mountain, right? You're passing off management roles. You're hiring the next generation and kids, and you're passing it off. And now you're to the bottom of the mountain now. But you need another mountain to climb. So what's that going to be? Are you going to travel? Are you going to go out in your community and serve maybe an organization that you really love and didn't have time for before? Are you going to be an advisor to the farm, right? We have a lot that like to step back, but they still advise the farm. Maybe that's in a formal family council meeting every few months or every year. But think about that and start vocalizing that. Bring that above the water, above the surface, and start talking about that with your friends. And so I'm not sure how I am doing on time, honestly, but I think in closing, I want to talk to you guys just, if you need support through any of this, think about the people around you, right? You don't have to come hire me or Pinion to come help you through these conversations. Think about the trusted advisors you already have in your corner, right? If you have a banker, a lawyer, if you have someone, maybe you have a small board of people in your community that you trust, go talk to them about these. Tell them, you know what, my son's 18, he's about to go to college, I want to hire him when he gets back, I want to bring him on. Like, what do you think I should do? What are the best practices? How did it go with your family? So think about those people in your own community. Think about peer groups. I'm sure there's some industry peer groups, especially down here in this area, how heavy the industry is. Pinion has peer groups. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. We love getting peer groups together because, like I said, there's a lot of times we get 12 different people in the same room and they look around and they're like, oh, I'm not the only one having these problems. Like, I'm not crazy, right? And you can talk to one another. You can case study each other and say, hey, I'm having, I was just in one 2 months ago where they're having some really, like Anna said, last year was a tough year. This year we're looking forward to some really tough years, especially in the grain market. And this one peer member came and he was really, really honest and frank with his peer members, and he said, I've got to talk to my dad and I've got to have some really frank conversations because I don't know how much longer we can survive, and because of a few choices he's hell-bent on, I'm worried it's going to break the farm and the family. And so he got advice from his peers and he got accountability, and they're meeting together in a couple weeks, and I'm honestly excited to hear what came of that, what's coming, down the pipeline for them, because he really got some great advice from people that have gone through it before. So in closing, I just want you guys, these are kind of my hot spiels. If you don't remember anything I talked about, think about, in the absence of a story, people are going to make one up. If you're not talking about it, I promise you people are thinking about it, and they're making up a story of what they think, right? Certainty can be as valuable as agreement. Not everyone has to agree. Honestly, not many decisions will always be in 100% agreement. We always say that even if you don't have an agreement, at least make sure everyone's certain of what the standards of that problem are, right? And progress over perfection. So it's not going to be perfect today. Maybe it's not perfect in 2 years or 3 years, but if you keep moving that progress down the road, you keep making better decisions, and the trust in the family will grow. So recognize the value of being a family business, but act as if you are not one, right? I see the value in family businesses every day. I just see it when I go out and travel the country and go to peer groups and talk to people and learn about their industry and their family, and I get to sit at their kitchen table and talk to them about what's important to them. I see it in my own life, right? I'm going and I'm hopping in a combine with my dad in one seat and a kid on the floor and my husband in the grain cart. So I see it myself, the value of what it is to work with your family. But sometimes you have to act like you're not one. You have to put those policies in place. You have to make those decisions and have those conversations early on, because it really will, when you come down the line, you'll thank yourself that you had those tough conversations and that you made sure everyone knew the expectations before they came back to the family farm. I don't want you guys to have to call me, but you always can if you need to. That's why we're here. Like I said, I love talking to family farms and just hearing their story. So thank you guys for being here and for listening to me. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. Yes?
It sounds like there's a lot of hard conversations in developing them. Do you have any advice on how to approach those so that they're successful or productive?
Yes, that's a great question. So how to have hard conversations, right? It's funny. This is actually the topic. I think I had another slide. We have a newsletter we put out every month. That's my topic for March. So if you sign up, you'll get my newsletter article about it. But yeah, if you're talking from one generation to another, is that what you're thinking? Because that's what a lot of times what I am looking at is you want to make them, again, you want to not act like your family for just a second. You want to go to that person, talk to them, whatever the dialogue is. Maybe it's an email, maybe it's on the phone, maybe it's in person, and you say, Mom, Dad, brother, sister, son, whatever it is. I need to talk to you about X, Y, Z. These are my concerns. Let's schedule a time to talk. And this is what I tell people. Schedule a time to talk about it where you're alone, you're in a room, you're maybe at the kitchen table, honestly. It's not a discussion to have over Thanksgiving dinner, right? It's not a discussion to have right after someone's birthday party. Because you want to sit down and you want to have the right hat on. So one of my big things is plan a time to talk to the person about it. Tell them what you want to talk about and maybe a few of your concerns, just a couple lines. And then stop. And then stop, let them think about it, let you think about it more, and come together and have those conversations. And that's where a lot of things we talked about, if you can have trust with them, not jump to accusations, right? And have that dialogue, and just make sure you're both being heard and understood. Don't think that first meeting is a final meeting, right? You can have it again in a couple weeks or a month. And slowly, right? Progress over perfection. And hopefully those conversations are getting easier and easier each time until you can come to a conclusion. I hope that helps. Any other questions? Yeah.
A lot of times when I talk to farmers who are thinking about their children taking on the farm, particularly when their kids are sort of anywhere between 12 and 17, 18, there's this real ambiguity. Yeah. I want them to have the farm. I love this place. God, I don't want them to have to work as hard as I did. And you hear that from the kid also. So are there best practices for kind of working through that discussion and that decision process that will help your, as a parent, that you can help your child make a good decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so you have to take it again. It's kind of that sliding scale of 1 to 10. How much do they understand? 12 to 17 is a great age to get them a little more involved, right? Maybe at that point, again, kind of speaking my grain background, so they probably know how to drive a tractor. They're probably running some equipment. They're probably feeding animals and doing that thing. But have they seen, have they been to a meeting with you and your banker? Have they sat down and talked okay, son, we just got all our crops sold. Now we're going to go pay off our operating line. And why do we have an operating line? This is why we have an operating line. What do I have to do to get it? Well, my banker's going to talk to you about it for a second, right? Those discussions, if you think you have a child that's really interested, it's time to pull them in and have those discussions, right? You're not making them pick when to buy or sell grain or exactly what variety to pick, but maybe you bring them along to your seed meeting. Maybe you bring them to a conference like this, right? Or you have your trusted advisors that you say, hey, come along. We're going to go talk to the lawyer this year about our land agreements. I want you to hear what we discussed. They're probably only going to get a little bit of it, but they'll start picking up and realizing that it's more than just picking fruit, driving a tractor. It's more than just, driving a truck around town. There's more to being a farmer and what will it all entail. I'll tell you that's one thing our team really heavily has. As we work with families, we're always asking, what's your plan for the next generation? Have you prepped them? Have you talked to them? My colleague will actually be in Kansas Saturday, and there's a family that is getting ready to bring on anywhere from 4 to 6 kids in the next 3-ish years, I think. I don't remember exactly, but some of them are in college. Some of them are doing their away from the family farm jobs that they're required to do first. And so they came to us and they said, hey, we know how much they're going to have to come back and take on. So will you help us start teaching them what they need to expect and to do? Some of them might end up being off-farm manager, like off-farm owners, right? They never work on the farm, but they're still owners in the farm. And so we're starting to have discussions with them and have trainings with them to get them to know what they need to know, right? So it's kind of a degree, but as they get older, you can always give them more, and you can step in and start kind of showing them the business side of the farm. Great question, though. Any other questions? Yeah.
How does the next generation
You're good.
get that outside experience, like let's say college or a job outside the farm, when they're already really involved in the business
Mm-hmm.
and they can't just leave for a season? Like,
Yeah.
they can't leave.
Yeah. That's a great question. So she asked, how does the next generation get the experience or a job off their family farm if the family farm needs them? And so that's where I'd come to you and I'd say, over your farm, what is the guiding principle, right? Maybe for your farm or that farm, what we're speaking of, maybe they don't need to go off farm. There's a need now for you to come back and for you to bring your knowledge and your skills and to help us out. I can definitely see that. And so I think my only advice would be to think, what does the farm need? Are you getting that knowledge now, right? So say there is a farm that they really need their kids to come back as soon as they can. Maybe mom is running the books, but it's gotten big and it's gotten bloated and she just can't handle it all. Maybe is there someone that's going out and getting an accounting degree? Maybe someone that's going out and learning business accounting so that when they get back, they can take some stress off of wherever the stressor is in the business, right? So yeah, don't be afraid to go out and get short courses or special education, or even just finding, like I said, peer groups where you can go around the country and you can walk the farm of someone else and get knowledge, not necessarily in a job, but at least you're reaching out and you're still growing your knowledge. So great question. Okay, anyone else? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Taking anything of this kind of formality serious, or like they're just brushing it aside, so you're not then all on the same page.
Yeah. And that's where you can call me. I can get your family in the room and talk, hopefully. I say that jokingly because we really don't work with families unless everyone wants us there. I don't force people in a room and you have to do this. I wish I could sometimes. I'd probably do it to my own dad first. You have to do this. That's a great question. So I would say, I would talk with whoever your managers, your upper guys, your upper leaders of the business are, and you need to bring them something like this of this is the value. Show them the value in it. Show them, maybe you can look back in the history of your farm and say, remember that family member we brought on and after 2 years it was a disaster and we had to get rid of them and it cost money? This could have prevented that. Maybe a probationary could have prevented that. Or, those kids we brought on and they had no knowledge of anything we did. They just came back because they knew they could get a job. Maybe there's some background experience you can bring up to them. But you've got to sit down with them and you've got to show them the value of it. And maybe it's hard when you're not the sole owner. There's other people you have to work with. But maybe if you can set an example, I'm thinking maybe with your own kids, if you're getting multiple generations involved, you can say, we wrote up the job description for our son because when he comes back, this is what we expect of him, and show them how that's working, right? We have a farm that requires each person that comes back, they have multiple different operations going. They have a dairy, they have beef, and they have grain. And so they say, you've got to cycle through all before you decide where you're going permanently. And some of them balked at that, right? They're like, I don't want to go work on the dairy. I'm a grain guy. Well, it's part of the family business that you're going to be part owner of. You need to know it. So, yeah, that's a tough one, though. Because there are times, I'll be honest, there are times even in my business where I have to say, I can't do it. If you're not going to do it, I can't make you do it, right? And so sometimes it's not going to work. But maybe in some ways you can start implementing that, right? Great question. Any other questions?
I think if we would take the perspective and run a farm
Yeah.
But that's, we don't want to be honest in business. We want our children, we want family members, by God, we created this, and it's my kid, they can certainly do it.
Right.
Herschel Walker, really great state of Georgia, is the best running back in the world in my mind.
Yeah.
His son was a cheerleader, okay? So if we would run a farm the way we would run any other team, but we don't want to be honest. We don't want to hurt the feelings. We want little Johnny to be able to come back because certainly he can be able to do this.
Right.
How many professional athletes do you know that has a kid that's a professional athlete? It is so rare. How much more wildly successful? And we talk about family farms being in trouble. It's the economy, it's the, no, it's leadership.
Right. Right.
We put the best leaders in place. We put, and it's called nepotism. That's what it's called. And we are all guilty of nepotism. We cut it off its head and said, listen, buddy, you gotta make your own way, and your last name means nothing here. And maybe your kid, you want him to run the farm, maybe he needs to be the weed puller, the tractor driver. He's 35 years old, the best he can do is change oil and pump fuel, because you got better to do it. If we would do that, the state of farming would be in a much better position.
Correct. You know, there is a way to do this so Sunday dinner. Yeah.
If that's the thing, is we don't want to have hard conversations, we want to speak truth.
Yeah.
We want to go the easy route, hashtag, and let it go.
Yeah.
But we would operate on a team, and we call it a team. We don't operate on a sports team, we would operate on a family farm. Ever.
Right. Thank you, John. John, so if you guys hear, he brings up a good point, right? Family, the nepotism in it. Are we putting the best people in the roles they should be in? Are we building their leadership? Right. That's why we are such an advocate for that next generation continuing their education and their leadership skills, right? You don't want to put someone into a spot just because they were your daughter, your son, your nephew. They need to have the skills they need to run that team because it will drag down the business, right? I promise you Sunday dinner can still work. I fully left the plans of taking over my family farm like we thought. I still go to my parents' house all the time. I still go and help him, still make decisions. I still get calls. I don't get the call that the cows are out and you have to go wrangle them back in because I live far enough away now. But it can still work. And so thank you, John. Those are great points. And hopefully today's session, really helped open your eyes about the conversations you need to have, the expectations you need to lay out now to avoid those problems. I think I'm out of time. Thank you, guys. Oh.
Real quickly.
So, just real quick, Bill is a co-worker with Emma and Alan Rapids here as well. We've been involved with this conference for about 3 years now as far as attending, and it's our first year to have a speaker, and we've also got a booth this year. So, very supportive of Chris and the organization and Mary Beth and her content. So, just wanted to let you people know that Opinion does have a booth here if you want to follow up and have conversations. Emma has to take off tonight.
Yes. Yes, I'm going to hang out after for a little bit if you guys have questions. Thank you, Bill, for that plug for Pinion. You guys have a great conference here. I was talking to Anna about it. I'm a rookie to it all, but everything I've seen has been great. Organized well. You guys have great classes. And as much as you might sit down and think I'm tired, I want to go across the river and have fun, like the stuff you guys learn in here today are the things you can take back to your business for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Emma. Can we thank Emma, please? Wait. You get a lovely parting gift. Thank you so much. So we're in for a treat. For more information about thinking about farm management and family farms, we have David Mayo here, who's from East Carolina University. And as someone who went to Chapel Hill, it's a little difficult to do this. He's with the Executive Farm Management Program at ECU, and he focuses on family farms. And I've heard him speak before, and he's wonderful. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Anna. All right, before I get started, this is a collaboration between 4 universities, so I'm going to ask you to get a little bit of exercise. If you are a fan of any of these universities, please stand when I call those out. And we'll start with the best, but also probably not as many people went here. East Carolina University, where I'm from. Any ECU fans here? The purple and gold, the Pirates. We have the coolest mascot. Anyway. We'll come back to that one. How about anyone here that is a NC State University fan? All right, stand up.
I've done enough standing.
Okay. All right, NC State?
My kid went there.
Perfect. I went there also, so I'm standing. How about UGA? Anybody from Georgia? All right, a few from Georgia. All right, and Clemson. All right, anybody Clemson? Okay. Well, those are the 4 universities that came together back in 2017 or so to start the Executive Farm Management Program. One of the NC State alumni attended the TPAP program over in Texas and thought it was a great experience and wanted to bring something similar to the Southeast. And so being in the Southeast, we tried to build a program that would focus on farms like we have in the Southeast. So the first year we offered the program, we went through with a really heavy focus on sweet potato and tobacco production. And we did that through these 4 areas. We went through strategic planning, financial management, human resource management, and family business. So those are the 4 core focus areas that we have. A lot of the ag programs that you see are focused on how to grow crops and things like that. That's not what you're learning here. You're learning how to make this into a professional business and take your farm business to the next level. So kind of like you heard about family business from Emma's talk, this is exactly what we're helping you do in this program, is formalize those processes, think strategically, and think beyond ag. So we bring in a lot of speakers from all across the country who are specialists, not just in agriculture, but in industry. So you'll hear from industry expertise. We've had in Amazon Fresh to talk about the future of how fresh produce will be sold in the country. We've had IBM Food Trust in to talk about how blockchain is going to be utilized in agriculture. And we try to bring in really exciting speakers to reinforce some of that industry knowledge. In strategic planning, we use a tool called Business Model Canvas. Has anybody used Business Model Canvas before? All right, so in my day job at ECU, I'm in the Miller School of Entrepreneurship, which is a top 30 entrepreneurship program, number 3 program for entrepreneurship in the South, and this is core to what we use in our program. So you're taking really professional, outside of ag tools and applying them to agriculture to get us even further along in ag. For financial management, we have Scott Mickey, who teaches a lot of that content. A lot of you may be familiar with Scott and his work. So looking at when to buy, when to sell, those sorts of issues. And then I work on some of the financial management piece for related entities. Like this year we're looking at evaluating whether we buy a trucking company or not within our farm case. For human resources, we have Ms. Sharon Justice, who teaches that section. She's with Justice Leadership, an HR professional, former college professor as well, to think about things like generational transition. Think about how we work with others in the workplace, and how do we hire, how do we put policies in place. And then finally, family business succession. Almost all farms, over 93% of farms are family businesses. And so we get to focus a lot on those issues, a lot of the things that Emma talked about today. This curriculum is pretty adaptable. Like I said, we started out with sweet potatoes and tobacco, but what we found was a lot of the businesses that were coming in, a lot of those farms also had many other diverse operations, and so we began to expand. We did one section totally focused on fruit and vegetable production, and then kind of what we've settled on is a farm case that is kind of the amalgamation of what a farm would look like in the Southeast that has fruits and vegetables. So many of you probably also have row crops along with that. And so we have a pretty diverse farm that the case is based off of. And if you read the case, you'll look at it and go, hey, that looks really familiar. Did you copy this from my farm? Did you write this from my books? And the answer is we didn't, but we've seen a lot of farms, and we have a lot of things in common on our farms. So that case study is really what you dive into during Executive Farm Management Program. It's a way for us to communicate and talk about topics without bringing in personal information from those sitting in the room. So we can talk about the concepts, practice the toolkit without you having to pull out your own financials and do an analysis and share it with another member at your table. So another thing positive that comes along with that is we're able to puts you into small teams where you build relationships and you have a peer that you can call when you have questions. And I think that's been a really great outcome of the class. We have about 140 alumni now. We usually do an alumni event every year and bring those alumni back where we have a speaker come in. I think last year we had Jolene Brown. I don't know if any of you heard Jolene speak. Yes, she does an awesome job, so she came in and spoke last year. And we're looking at a few options for exciting speakers for this year's event. All right, so this year's program is going to be underway shortly, so probably too late to get going for this year's program. We're going to be getting started on Saturday here in Savannah. This year we have 3 sessions. We have a week in Savannah, or about 4 to 5 days in Savannah. We'll have a week in Raleigh this year, and we have a week in Charleston this year. We're looking at some different options. I know that's a large time commitment, and so we're looking at maybe some hybrid options, maybe shortening it to 2 locations next year. That would allow us to maybe reduce the cost of the program a little bit and still offer all the content. So next year, we've tentatively scheduled 10 days for 2 sessions in Savannah and in Raleigh. So that's a lot of content covered there. We usually start in the morning about 8:30. We usually wrap up around 5:30 and then go out to a dinner together where we usually have a guest speaker at dinner as well. So this is, when I say 10 days, it is 10 full days. You're kind of dropping yourself into an ag MBA program where you're going to be learning so fast and so much material and building so many relationships very quickly. Here's the cost breakdown of what we're projecting that to be next year. And if you ask any of our alumni, they'll say, I encourage you to find one of those 140-ish alumni that we have and ask them, is it worth the money? I think 100% of them would say, yes, absolutely. And I think about some examples of our alumni when they're looking at how do we do a capital expenditure on a new piece of equipment? How do we analyze that? If we can help you make that decision better, is $5,000, $6,000 anything compared to if you're making a $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 investment? No, absolutely not. So the tools are going to make you money very quickly. I actually think that's my last slide. Oh, one more. If you want to learn more about this program, you can contact Michael Best, who's in charge of this program at NC State, or scan this QR code. That'll take you to the website. Or you can feel free to reach out to me as well, and I'll get you connected. My email address is mayod@ecu.edu, mayod@ecu.edu, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions as well. But I want to open it up to the group and see what questions you all have.
So it's 2 weeks.
Next year, we're looking at 2 weeks. And this year, it's about the same number of days, but split up into 3 locations. But it's probably going to be 2 weeks, 2 5-day sessions next year. Yeah, and I know that can be a challenge for most farmers to find the time to break away, and we try to schedule that at the time of year where all the other conferences and things are going on because it's the only time that you have. So I know the time. For most farmers, it's the most challenging thing is the time to get away. But it's also removing yourself from your farming operation and getting away and giving yourself a chance to plan. There's a lot of value in just that and getting away from the operation. They'll probably be posted in June. But if you want to email me when you're ready to make that decision, I can make sure you're up to date on it. We traditionally do it once per year. Yes. These dates were for 2026. There are projected dates. So the question was around when will we know the dates, or when will we know the dates for sure? These are our tentative dates. Most likely, it's going to end up on or very close to these dates, just because scheduling wise, there's a lot of recurring things that happen every year, and we have only a few weeks that we can move dates in between. So these are likely to be the dates. But there's one more week we could swap out with, which would be this upcoming week.
Topics or
Yeah. So the question is, are topics of discussion posted before the session events? Yeah. So one of the first things that we do, and we've actually collected this right now, is we do a disc profile for everyone in the room. So when you show up on the first day, we know everyone's disc profile and where they fall in the room, and there's a really interesting discussion ahead of time. So there is a little bit of prep work ahead of time. You will have access to the syllabus ahead of time to know which topic areas are going to be covered. So for instance, next week here in Savannah, we're going to be doing a lot of prep work around the family business part and the family dynamic part with human resources. So we're going to be doing a lot of prep work there, and then we're going to introduce how you'll look through financial statements and kind of the setup for financial statements next week, and introduce Business Model Canvas. So that's kind of what's on the schedule for the first week, and then the next week we start to dive more in depth. And then I think we have some guest speakers coming in on maybe insurance, how to buying the right insurance policy, maybe someone from the port next week as well, looking at how you export ag-related products. Great question. Thank you. There are others? It's a fairly small group. This time we have 24 participants. It ranges anywhere from 20 to 35 participants. Yeah, we try to keep it pretty small because we do it in a room about this size, and we break into small groups of about 5. So this year will probably be 5 groups. We'll have 5 groups, and they get to know each other well. So the capstone of this is a presentation to leaders in agriculture on the case. So what you would do in the case if you were in charge of, we call it the Brown Family Farm. So if you were in charge of the Brown Family Farm, what changes would you make to make the business more successful? And that's a presentation during the last day. That's about a 10-minute presentation. Other questions? Thank you guys for your engagement. I have one last question for you all. If you're not UGA or NC State or Clemson or ECU, what are y'all a fan of? Michigan State. Oh my goodness. We did have a blueberry farmer from Michigan in our program one year, so we primarily focus on the Southeast, but we have had a few from outside of the Southeast. Thank you all so much for attending today and for your thoughtful questions, and look forward to hearing more from you if you want to catch me outside. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. And we're very fortunate next that we're going to have an overview of USDA services, loans, and insurance. And we will have 2 different talks that are going to split up. We're going to have, oh Lord, and I'm losing names everywhere, I'm sorry. We're going to have Chad Scruggs and Meredith Johnson, who are from FSA, followed by Chris Rutland, who's from the Risk Management Agency, Valdosta office, and they're all going to be talking about various aspects of finances. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. My name's Chad Scruggs. I am District Director with the Farm Services Agency out of the southeast part of the state. So today, me and Meredith are going to go over some resources that are going on that we have. As you mentioned earlier today, 24 is a year we hope we don't have another 24. So, the disaster, the hurricane, a lot of things happen in 24. So I'm going to kind of go through some things today, some programs that you need to be aware of. We have some deadlines coming up, and so kind of want to go through the process. If you're not familiar with FSA, if you don't know who we are, Farm Service Agency, you need to get to know us if you have any type of agriculture, row crop. If you're a producer, not just for our programs, but for our sister agencies, FSA and RMA. So it's vital that you get started with the Farm Service Agency first. So first slide I want to kind of talk about is registering your farm. The most important thing you can do for any access, any USDA programs is get a farm serial number, okay? You have to have a farm serial number. You need to come into the office. You basically is required to participate in any program. You need to basically bring in your contact information, your tax ID number, whether you're an individual, or a corporation. You also your operating information, adjusted gross income, things of that nature, so we can have that information in order to deem you eligible for benefits through FSA, NRCS, crop insurance, etc. So, and also when you come in to bring that farm serial number, a lot of times we want you to identify that on a map, basically a plat or a deed or something to show proof of ownership in order to get your farm serial number. Okay. Once you get that farm number, the next step is basically you want to have an acreage report on file, whether that be crops, vegetables, bees, any type of product, where it be honeybees, anything to show or determine what crop you have. So that way, if there is a disaster like we had in 24 or any disasters in the future, you have that documented with us. Most of our disaster programs, are you aware, are always a year later or 2 years later. So every time you get a crop in the ground, anytime you plant a crop, please come in by our deadlines and get those crops reported to us timely. Very important. Sometimes there are some provisions where we're allowed to accept some late filed acreage reports, but I advise you to get your farm number, get your crops reported to us as soon as they're planted. It's very, very important, okay? We also do have some deadlines. As you can see, apples, blueberries, canola, peaches, rye, rapeseed, fall seeded small grains. That deadline is January the 15th, okay? So if you got blueberries, apples, etc., come in by the 15th, because if you don't come in by the 15th, you come in after the 15th, we're going to have to charge you $46 a farm. So if you can, you know where your office is at, you know the crops you have. If you have a deadline of one of these crops, please get in and try to get those reported as soon as possible, okay? Okay. The next couple slides is the Tree Assistance Program. Most of you have heard of it as TAP. Basically what it provides financial assistance to eligible orchardists and nursery growers to replant or rehabilitate eligible bushes, trees, and vines that are lost by a natural disaster. Okay? As you know, Hurricane Helene came through. So if you have any type of tree, bush, or vine, whether it be a pecan, I call it a pecan, I'm not a pecan man, but but also blueberries, grapes, anything of that nature that received damage due to a qualifying event, you need to come in, and you can come in and apply for assistance to replant that crop, okay, or replant that tree, bush, or vine. We do have we got an extension on tree, bush, or vine, the TAP program. If you suffered any damage to Hurricane Helene, I advise you to get in by, I think it's January 31st. They gave us 90 days. So in order to get those timely filed, any damage that was received to a pecan, blueberry, or tree, bush, or vine due to Helene, you can come in and apply to help. We can give you assistance to replant that tree, bush, or vine. So, and that deadline, like I say, is coming up pretty quick. Okay, NAP. That is our non-insured crop disaster program. Basically what this is, it provides financial assistance to producers of non-insurable crops that are not covered by crop insurance, okay? And it protects against natural disasters that result in low yields or crop losses, or prevents crops from being planted, which is prevented planting. Basically, vegetables, anything that crop insurance does not cover, you can come into your local office. January 31st is the deadline to purchase crop insurance for any spring planted crops or fall planted crops. So that's something that's very important. You can purchase that. If you're a socially disadvantaged, we waive that fee of $250 or $350 now, and then you get a 50% reduction in your premium. If you're non-SDA socially disadvantaged, then you pay the administrative fee and then the premium. So just be aware that deadline is coming up to purchase NAP on any crop that is not covered by crop insurance. Okay. This is probably a big one if you've heard of it. ECP, that is our Emergency Conservation Program. excuse me, it helps farmers and ranchers repair damage to farmlands caused by natural disasters and put in place methods for water conservation during severe drought through funding and technical assistance. As you may be aware, Hurricane Helene came through and did severe damage to a lot of our farmland, trees, pecan trees, etc. So this program is put in place to help you remove the debris out of that, or any type of debris that's in the cropland or any tree bushes or vines that have been damaged. In order to remove that, we give you cost share assistance to help you get that out of the way, so that you can retain and get back to that field or orchard in order to put it back in production. So if you haven't heard of ECP, Emergency Conservation Program, the deadline on this is June the 1st to come in and apply in order to get assistance to help you clean up your fields or orchards to get that debris out of the field. Okay, this is the organic certification, cost share certification program. It basically provides organic producers and handlers of financial assistance to reduce the cost of organic certification. The program reimburses producers and handlers for a portion of their paid certification costs. So if you are paying to get organic certification, we can reimburse you up to $750. Basically, is what we're going to give you back if you come in and sign up, bring proof where you paid to get your organic certification. We can then reimburse you up to $750. Okay. Okay. The Food Safety Certification and Specialty Crop Program. This basically provides assistance to specialty crop operations that incurred eligible on-farm stored food safety program expenses for 24 and 25. This deadline is January 31st, 2025. They basically increased the median and small farmers. it was 0 to $500,000. You could only get assistance, but now they went from 0 to $500,000 to $500,000 to $1 million. So anything gross sales over $1 million, you would not be eligible for this program. So anything of gross sales $1 million or less, you would be eligible to come in. And we can give you assistance for 75% development of food safety plan for first-time certification, maintaining or updating a food safety plan. That would be a 75% up to a maximum of $675. Your food safety certification, that's 75% up to a $2,000 maximum. Your certification upload fees, that's up to $375. You get paid for microbiological testing, microbiological testing for soil amendments and water. So we'll pay you for up to 5 tests on all of those of 75% of that cost. So, you know, if you make if your operation makes over $1 million gross sales, then you would not be eligible. But if you are doing food safety, which we are, so this is a program that we're trying to get more folks involved. You have a lot of expense up front with that, so I encourage you to keep up with those costs. And if you are $1 million or less, then come see the FSA office, and especially for 24 and 25, that deadline is January 31st, okay, for reimbursement. Okay, this is probably the hottest topic program we have right now. As you're aware, we are in the process of a marketing assistance for specialty crop program sign-up. This basically provides eligible specialty crop producers with marketing assistant payments to help them with engage in activities that aid in expanding domestic specialty crop markets or in developing new markets for their specialty crop in 25, okay? This is the MASS program, if you've heard about it. The deadline was extended to tomorrow, okay? If you have not visited an FSA office and you have sold a specialty crop in 23, 24, or a new producer in 25, you have gross sales or any sale of any specialty crop, you're missing out. It's a payment. It's a direct payment. The deadline is tomorrow. So funding and payment limitations have increased. It was $2.1 billion they allocated to us. They just came back and gave us another $630 million. So that also increased the payment limitation from $125,000 to $900,000 per legal entity. So if you have sold crops in 23 or 24, and so what you will need to do is pick your highest gross sales year, okay? So if you have that, I encourage you to, by tomorrow, because there will be no extensions, there will be no anything, basically. So I encourage you, tomorrow is the deadline. Contact your office if you have not signed up. We have to have these payments made by January the 20th. So we were told we will have them loaded, approved by the 14th, and payments should go out on the 17th. So just want to make sure everybody hears us. If you have sold a specialty crop in 23 or 24, and if you do not visit an FSA office tomorrow, there are no extensions. You'll be out. So, yes, sir.
Correct that you cannot add value added to your numbers, only the product itself.
The question was asked, can you add value added? No, you have to use the raw product. So if you have any type of, like, if you grow strawberries and you sell strawberries, the raw product, you can't value the jam, you know. So, but you are correct, no value added. So.
What percent of the gross sales would be made on?
Well, I'm sorry.
What percent of gross sales would be paid on?
All right, the question is what percent of gross sales? You're talking about the factor? Okay, so the way this payment factor is, there's 5 categories. There's 0 to 49,000. There's 49,000 to 100,000. There's 100,000 to 150, 200. There's 5 categories up to $1 million. So each one of those sections, so whatever that money range is, it'll be factored right on up to $1 million. And then anything over $1 million will be factored. So we don't even know the factor yet. So that's we'll know this week. The only good thing is we're hoping that the factors will be a lot less now since they added the $630 million. But there will be a factor from 0 to $1 million, and then $1 million over. We're just hoping the factors will be a lot less now. So everybody wants to know the factor. So I hope there's no factor. So any questions on MASS program or anything that I mentioned? There is a disaster program coming, as you know, for 23-24. So I hope that we'll get some guidance on that pretty soon. So at this time, any questions before I turn it over to Meredith for Farm Law?
If I'm a beginning farmer, how do I find out where my local FSA office is and how to get in touch?
Okay. Question is, if I'm a beginning farmer, how do you get in touch with us? You can go to farmers.gov or USDA-FSA.gov, and you can actually go in. It'll ask you the questions about, hey, I'm a beginning farmer. I've never visited an FSA office before. It'll ask you what county. You put your county, and then when you click on that county, it will then put you to that service center that services your county. So you may have one office that services 5 offices. So, but yes, it's a good question. Thank you. So, okay. I'll be around if anybody has any questions. So thank you. Here, Meredith.
All right, good afternoon. The programs that Chad just talked with you about, those programs are on, they come out of our farm program side. So we have another side of Farm Service Agency, and that's known as our farm loan side. And that department handles most of the loans, okay? So we'll talk about what we have available loan-wise, and so we have direct loans and we have guaranteed loans. On the direct loans, we have operating loans. Those loans are made to help with harvesting. Those loans are made to help purchase equipment. Any type of operating expense that you may have, those loans are available. We have youth loans. We have direct operating micro loans, farm ownership loans,
direct farm ownership participation, direct farm ownership micro, direct down payment farm ownership loan, and emergency loans. Those loans are what we call our direct loan. Those loans are actually, you would come into the FSA office, complete the paperwork there. You would work solely with our office in processing and administering that loan. We also have what we call guaranteed loans, and those loans are actually administered out of a bank, an ag lending institution. We at Farm Service Agency, we guarantee those loans. So we wouldn't actually directly be working with you. You would work with your bank, who are guaranteed lenders or lending institutions. So we have what we call guaranteed loans. We have the easy guaranteed, the guaranteed operating, the farm ownership, the guaranteed conservation loan, and the land contract guarantee. So usually if you come in and you apply for a direct loan, you work with just our agency. If you apply for a guaranteed loan, you would be working mainly with your lender, and then they provide us the information. We review, guarantee it, and send that information to them. So, all right. Let's take a look at limits. All of our loans have limits, of course, I'm sure. You're aware of that. We'll start off with our guaranteed loans and see what type of limits we have. On the easy, there's a $100,000 limit. On the guaranteed operating is $2,236,000. On the ownership, $2,236,000. On the guaranteed conservation, $2,236,000. And the land contract, the lesser of $500,000, or the current market value of the property. Now we look at our direct loan, operating loan, $400,000. The operating micro loan, $50,000. The youth loan is actually $10,000. It's just recently increased. Farm ownership, $600,000. Farm ownership participation, $600,000. Farm ownership micro, $50,000, and emergency loan, $500,000. So I'll tell you a story about a micro loan that we had, and it was the first goat loan. No, it was a sheep loan this time. This was a sheep loan, and they flew the sheep into the county that they were wanting to apply for this loan. So I said, I really want to check this animal out. And the loan, they were applying for $8,000. And I'm like, one animal, I really have got to come see this animal. So when I got there were fans on this animal, and it was a prize champion and best looking animal I've seen. So I was like, wow, and so we were able to work it out, but we were only able to give him $5,000 at that time. But the child showed this in a fair, won all kinds of awards with it. So every time they'd win, they'd call me. So it was pretty fun. So I grew to love the little animal. All right, so our interest rates. Our interest rates change monthly. As of December 1st, as you can see, a direct loan, 4.75, micro, 4.75, farm ownership, 5.25, farm ownership micro, 5.25, farm ownership direct joint financing, 3.25, farm ownership down payment, 1.50, emergency, 3.75. So that's as of December 1st. The rates change again as of January 1st, and they change monthly. Once you sign your loan, that you're locked in at that interest rate, okay? If your loan is approved in December and you had a direct loan and it was 4.75 and you didn't close until February, and the February rate was 3.75, which it rarely drops that much, but if it happens to be, you do get the lesser of the two rates. So, but you are locked in for the term of your loan, okay? Normally on an operating loan, an annual operating loan, it is due in a year. we have an annual, we have operating loans that are term loans, and they could be 5 to 7 years. So the operating and the farm ownership can go all the way up to 40 years. So. Okay, so those loans are actually what I've talked with you about until now are handled out of our on our loan side of FSA. Now this loan is actually handled out of our on program side, but this is what we call our farm storage facility loan, and this loan is designed to help build or upgrade any facilities to store your commodities. Eligible facilities include, it could be a grain bin, it could be a barn, it could be a bulk tank, cold storage facility. It's up to $500,000 for storage facilities and up to $100,000 for storage and handling trucks. And those loans can be up 3 to 12 years in term. Okay, interest rate on those is 4.125% to 4.375%. So, and with those loans, you would work with our program side. Just want to tell you on the loan side, we have about 10 offices in the state of Georgia. Once again, farmers.gov, you can find the locations. And other than that, that should finish us up. Do we have any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for doing this.
So as she's pulling up the slides there, I do want to just take a second to acknowledge. You can see that I've named my presentation here, Protecting Your Investment, and I just want to say that I understand, and I want to take a minute to appreciate that when we say protecting your investment, we're not just talking about dollars and cents. It certainly is dollars and cents, as everybody in this room knows, but it's, I mean, for most of us here, it's your life, right? And not just your life, it's the life of generations before you in a lot of cases. So just want to take a second to acknowledge that. But yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about crop insurance, which was mentioned briefly in the previous presentation with FSA. They're our sister agency. We are organized into mission areas in USDA, and they're in our mission area. We work closely with FSA, and our programs are designed to be complementary and cooperative. So first, I'm just going to start with a couple of housekeeping. Well, actually, first, I'm going to introduce myself. I know it's been a while. My name is Chris Rutland, and I'm with the Risk Management Agency Valdosta Regional Office. We service the states of Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, also Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. But most of the things that I'm going to cover today are generally applicable if you don't happen to be from one of those states. There is an office, a regional office for RMA that services your state no matter where you live. Near the end of the slides, I will show you how to get to that. But just on a personal note, I am a South Georgia native. I was also brought up on a family farm. I'm still involved in it. We grow cotton and peanuts and also watermelons and corn, and we also have a nursery business. So I'm still involved in that, and just so y'all know, I'm not just a functionary. I have some skin in this game. So this is USDA's non-discrimination statement. I will not read it to you, but just know that USDA is an equal opportunity employer, provider, and lender. We don't discriminate based on any of those protected categories you see there. Also, my own personal disclaimer today, this presentation, I will highlight features of our risk management agency programs, but it's not comprehensive, and that anything that I say today that's incorrect cannot overrule a published policy or procedure or regulation. So I'll do my very best to not say anything incorrect, but if I do, those things take precedence. So today we'll cover first, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction to the Risk Management Agency. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with crop insurance, but you probably primarily deal with your agents. So we joke that RMA is the biggest USDA agency that you've never heard of. But I'll give a little talk about that. Then I'm going to go over one of our kind of a general overview of how most of our insurance programs work. Then I will cover specifically one of our newer insurance options called Hurricane Insurance Protection, which I'm sure is on the top of everybody's mind given the season that we had this year. And then lastly, if we have time, I will go over a brief overview of another kind of program that we have that's based on your revenue. So first, a little background of RMA. Who are we? Well, we manage the federal crop insurance program on behalf of the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation, which is a wholly owned government corporation. But we partner with private insurance companies who sell those products, who sell and service the insurance policies. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But we are divided into three groups. The first one is product management. That's the brain in Kansas City, and they deal with all the product design, the policy provisions, the premium and the rating, and all the actuarial information. Then we have a compliance division that does exactly what you think it would do. They ensure program integrity by preventing fraud, waste, and abuse. And then lastly, we have insurance services, which is the division that I work for. And we are kind of the boots on the ground. We're the local RMA people. A lot of times when folks want to get in touch with RMA producers or other stakeholders, we're the first people that they call. We also manage that agreement that I talked about with the private insurance companies. And we do most of the risk management, education, and outreach, which is what I'm doing right now. So as I mentioned, federal crop insurance is a public-private partnership. So we develop all of those things you see there. We develop the policies, we do the rating. We do that on behalf of the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation, who then agrees with private companies called approved insurance providers. We call that AIPs, and you'll hear me say a lot of acronyms and abbreviations today. In the federal government, we never met an abbreviation or an acronym we didn't like. I will try to explain them as I go, but if I say one that you don't know what it is, feel free to say, hey, wait a minute. So then those insurance companies have their own agents who sell and service those policies on behalf of the AIPs. And that is a blank slide that I just now accidentally added. Okay, so why would you purchase crop insurance? Well, for one, it protects you against yield or revenue losses from natural causes and market movements. And also, a lot of lenders will require you to have crop insurance. But the bottom line is it protects the bottom line. I worked on that for a while. Okay, so federal crop insurance is available under a lot of different types of plans and policies. And like I said, I'm going to go over kind of a general overview that's applicable to a lot of them. But just so as you see on this slide, this is not exhaustive at all. But just some of the crops that are insured in this region, you can see there. And I focus this list on specialty crops. But we also, of course, insure row crops as well. So, apples, avocados, sweet corn, tomatoes, nursery, oysters, bees, just a lot of different things. I will say, so some of those products may not be available everywhere. We don't insure avocados in, North Carolina because that would be agronomically inappropriate. But and also there may be things that are available in other parts of the country that are not available in this region. But you'll hear me say this a lot today. If you grow something and you want to get insurance on it, call a crop insurance agent. That's what you want to do. Before I move on, though, I am going to point out two things. Number one, for commodities that we don't have a program for. So number one, it may be insurable under a program that we have called Whole Farm Revenue Protection and Microfarm. They're kind of different versions of the same thing, but the basic idea is they insure the revenue on the whole farm rather than just as an individual commodity. And essentially anything that you produce on the farm that meets the definition of commodity can be insured under that program. So there's that option. Also, even if a crop or even a practice of a crop like green peanuts, for instance, is not available with a standard offer in your county, it may be insurable by written agreement, and that's when you go through your crop insurance agent, you essentially request an individual insurance offer for yourself, and those are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. But even if that crop is not available in your county, don't despair. Still call a crop insurance agent. You may be able to get insurance through a written agreement. So I talked about that general plan that I'm going to go through. This is going to be, feel free to let your eyes glaze over, especially if you already know how this works. But the basic idea of most of our programs is that we ensure production, either the yield or the revenue, but it's some way based on the production. So most of those policies, and this is specific to a plan that we call actual production history, APH, and you'll hear me say that a lot too, but it's generally applicable. Most of our plans are some variation of this. So basically the idea is you start out with an approved yield, and that's with some adjustments, essentially your historical average yield. Then you select a coverage level. You can think about that as like selecting a deductible, like for your health insurance, you can get a high deductible plan or a low deductible plan. Well, how much yield loss are you going to have before you get a payment? That's what you're selecting with your coverage level. Then for most plans, you also select a percentage of the price that's used to value that guarantee. So obviously we can't pay you an indemnity in corn or squash, right? So we have to value that production somehow. So we have a price. And for a lot of plans, you don't have to value it at the full price. You can even value it at customize your coverage that way. So the value of the production guarantee, just what I have here. It's the approved yield times the coverage level times the price selection. That's in dollars per acre. Then an indemnity will be due if due to an insured cause of loss, your harvested production times that price selection is less than the value of that production guarantee times the insured acres. So that is how it basically works. And like I said, most of our plans are some variation of that. There are some that are totally different, but most of them are some variation of that. And within that, for those plans that work that way, you generally have two broad coverage options. So the first one we call catastrophic risk protection, CAT coverage. And I won't go through the details, but basically what that means is that coverage level and that price selection are selected for you. It's 50% of the price, or 55% of the price, 50% coverage level. And the trade-off, it's a disaster program really. It's a catastrophic program, but the trade-off is that to you, it's almost free. So the entire premium is subsidized by the government. You just pay that one administrative fee, which is $655 per crop per county. The other major bucket is what we call buy-up coverage, and that's your customizable option. That's where you get to select that coverage level and select that price selection. And so those coverage levels can be from 50 to 85% or 75% for some crops. And the price selection can be from 60 to 100%, so up to the full value or the full price. And that premium subsidy, I know it's probably kind of hard to see here, but that premium subsidy, it's still subsidized, but the higher the coverage level you select, the lower the percent premium the government will pay. And the administrative fee for those is lower. It's $30 per crop per county. So take a breath. I know that was a lot. But kind of shifting gears here, we have a lot of what we call endorsements and options that can attach to that coverage that I was just talking about. Like if you think about that as your baseline coverage, there's a lot of kind of additional coverage that you can purchase. It's like if you have a homeowner's policy with a jewelry policy attached. It's kind of something like that. So one of those, one of the most popular and biggest in terms of liability endorsements that we have is called Hurricane Insurance Protection Wind Endorsement, HIP-WE. And of course that's top of everybody's mind because we had a terrible hurricane season this year. 2 major hurricanes affecting this region, this area, and also in other parts, Milton and Central Florida. It was a trying time. But we have an insurance product that can attach to one of those underlying policies. So you have to have underlying coverage to buy this. But the difference, what's different about it is that it's not based on the payments are not based on individual yield or production losses. So it covers a portion of that deductible up to the difference between 95% and whatever coverage level you selected. And I know that's confusing, but I have a graphic in a second that hopefully will clear that up. But basically, you cover a portion of that deductible, however much you want, and then the loss trigger for that is when the insured county, your county, or any county adjacent to your county experiences or is in the sustained wind, hurricane speed wind field from a named cyclone, and that's per NOAA. So when that happens, RMA will publish these triggered counties, and I say triggered in quotes because that's usually how we refer to it. But RMA will publish those triggered counties when the data becomes available. It's usually within a few weeks of the storm. And essentially, if you have insurance in force at that time, you get the payment automatically. So there's no loss adjusting, there's no notice of loss that you have to file. If you have the coverage when the storm hit, you get paid. And it's all based on data. I'll point out two things first, or highlight two things. First, the data that we use for that does not come from RMA. That data comes from the National Hurricane Center, which is part of NOAA. And second, because it pays regardless of any individual yield or revenue losses, it's a possible situation that you have no damage from a storm and you still get a payment. But also the opposite situation could be true as well. Like you could have some damage, but if your county did not trigger, then you would not get a payment. But in that case, you would still, if the damage was bigger than your deductible, you would still get a payment on your underlying coverage. So new for last year, there was an additional option that you can add or you can elect when you have that HIPWE coverage called tropical storm. It works basically the same way, but the trigger is different and the payment scheme is different. So instead of just hurricane wind speeds, like for the hurricane payment, for tropical storm, it's actually a double trigger. So you have to be in a county that has tropical storm winds, 34 knots, that's tropical storm force winds, and that county has to have a 4-day county average total rainfall of 5.9 inches or more. And it's 4 days, the day before, the day of, and 2 days later. So the indemnity for tropical storm is half that total HIP hurricane protection amount. So you can get up to 2 payments in a season, but you can never get more in a single season than that hurricane protection amount. So if you had 2 tropical storms, you would get 2 equal payments of half each. If you have a hurricane and then a tropical storm, you would get the full amount for the hurricane, nothing for the tropical storm. If you had a tropical storm and then a hurricane, which is what happened this year, you get 50% for the tropical storm and then 50% for the hurricane because that's all you have remaining. Oh, and one more thing I want to say. So NOAA can revise both the wind and the rainfall data. That rainfall data comes from the Climate Prediction Center, another part of NOAA. It's not RMA data, but they regularly do data quality checks, and they will revise that data. If new data comes out and additional counties triggered, those will pay automatically, just like before. But they are not going to go after you if your county untriggers based on the revised data. If you've already triggered, they won't go after you. So here's that graphic that I promised you. So you can see that blue portion, that's your underlying coverage. That's that historical yield, all of that. If you, in our hypothetical farm here, we have some crop that's valued at $100 per acre. That's your expected crop value for this year. If you selected 65% coverage, this first part is your underlying. So the HIPWE coverage range, assuming that you got as much as you could, would be 95 minus 65. So that's 30%. And 30% of $100 per acre, I set that up to make the math easy, 30% of $100 per acre is $30 per acre. So in our tropical storm example, if you had 2 tropical storms, you would get 15 and 15. If you had a tropical storm and then a hurricane, still 15 and 15. If you had a hurricane and then a tropical storm, 30 and 0. And I was careful a minute ago to say county average rainfall, and this has been an object of discussion in a lot of meetings that we've had with growers. So I just want to go through very quickly here how we calculate those rainfall totals. So the Climate Prediction Center releases gridded rainfall, average rainfall totals. So for every grid they have this set of grids. Every grid in the United States, they calculate the average rainfall in that grid. All right, but unfortunately, those grid boundaries do not line up with county boundaries, as you can see. So in this real-life example, this is Seminole County, Florida. This county has land in 4 grids. So what they do is they take the total from each grid in the county, and they weight it. They take the average of it, but weighted by the percent of the land in that, of the county's land that's in that grid. So you can see if we call these grids A, B, C, and D, 19% of grid A, or I guess 19% of the county's land was in grid A, 14% was in grid B, 29 was in grid C, and 38 was in grid D. And those are the rainfall totals, 5.5, 6.5, 4, and 8. And so because this grid here has most of the land, or a big portion of the land, it gets a bigger weight, right? So anyway, you multiply those two things and then you add them together. So the county average rainfall here would be 6.16 inches. So if this county also had tropical storm force winds, or was in the wind field, then this county and all the counties that touch it would qualify for that tropical storm payment. And this map just shows where it's available, where the HIPWE coverage is available. It's basically all the counties in the vicinity of the Gulf and of the East Coast, also Hawaii, but Hawaii is only hurricane. Tropical storm is not available in Hawaii. And I won't show this to you, but that is a video from farmers.gov on YouTube about this program. It explains it in detail. And that was all I have to say about HIPWE, my prepared remarks. So I'm going to very quickly cover this so that we can have some time for some questions. I know I'm between y'all and happy hour, so the last type of program that we have, we call whole farm revenue protection, and that's kind of designed, and microfarm, it's kind of sibling. Those programs are designed to cover things that are not covered anywhere else, but also things that are covered anywhere. It doesn't make you ineligible for this program, but the idea is that instead of ensuring the yield, which is what those other programs do, this program actually ensures the revenue. So essentially, instead of having a historic average yield for a crop, you have a historic average revenue, and you establish that with your tax records. But then after that, it kind of works the same. So once you have that established, that expected revenue, then you select a coverage level, and if your revenue from the farm is less than your insured revenue, then it pays you, due to an insured cause, it pays you the loss. One thing that's different about this that I do want to point out here is that it covers revenue for the whole farm, hence the name. But so it doesn't really look at losses on an individual crop. So if you had a terrible year on your tomatoes, but a great year on your sweet corn, you may not get a payment under this if the income from the sweet corn was enough to make up for the bad year on the tomatoes. So it looks at the whole farm, and like I said, it's based on your tax records. For whole farm, you need 5. For micro farm, which is essentially the same program but simplified and with less paperwork, there's an income cap on that though, and you need 3 years for that. So that income cap, I'll just say it because I have it there. It's $350,000 in the first year and $400,000 in the second year. But the good thing about this program, like I mentioned before, there's lots of good things about it, but one good thing about it is that you can really insure almost anything, that as long as it meets the definition of commodity in the basic provisions, which is a federal regulation that we have that pertains to RMA. But as long as it meets that definition, it's probably insurable under this program. So that's the same. The only difference is, your tax, since it's based on your tax income, or your tax revenue, your taxes have to be filed before you can finalize a claim. All right, so Beth said that we need to leave you guys with some action items. So I really only have one. I pull up this because this circle here, it shows the cycle. Crop insurance works on a cycle, a yearly annual cycle. And where the dates fall on this circle is based on the crop year for the individual crops. So, different crops are going to have different dates, but they all basically work that same way. The one I'm going to highlight here right now, because it's probably the most important one on this slide, is the sales closing date. That is the deadline to apply for insurance. And like I said, it's different for every crop. And I don't have my notes because we're having the technical difficulties here, but I know that several important ones are coming up. I know there's several crops that the sales closing date is January 31st. All the spring row crops in this region, their sales closing date is February 28th. Anyway, so like the main take-home point I want to hammer home here is, if crop insurance is interesting to you at all, if you're at all interested in this, contact crop insurance agent pronto. Don't put it off, because even if you're well ahead of the deadline, it's never too early, and you're going to have to get together some documentation. You're going to have to get some records together. There's an application process. It's difficult to do at the last minute. So don't put it off. Contact the crop insurance agent today, or soon. Well, how do you do that? So on RMA's homepage, which I have up here, it's just rma.usda.gov. If you click that tools and reports that I have highlighted right there, there's an agent locator tool there. And once you click on that, you can put in your zip code or your town and specify like 50 miles or 100 miles or 200 miles, and it will list all of the crop insurance agents within that radius that you specify. Also, I will point out here that there's tons of information on this website and tools. Just a couple that you can see there in the slide. There's a cost estimator tool that can help you, estimate the actual cost for your operation. But again, a crop insurance agent will help you with that too. You can view the actuarial documents for that crop in your county, which will show you all the actuarial information, the dates, the deadlines, the special provisions, everything is there. And then also under that About Crop Insurance tab, which is just to the right, there's a lot of topics pages. There's a really great topics page on hurricanes and hurricane insurance. There's specialty crops, organics, lots of good information there. And all of these tools that I have listed here are accessible from that page, so don't worry about writing that down. And with that, I conclude my prepared remarks. That's the phone and email for my office at the top there. Also, that's my my USDA email there. And then my boss and deputy director and specialty crop liaison for the Valdosta Regional Office was gracious enough to let me put his contact up here as well. So, Matthew Wilkin. So with that, any questions about anything I talked about, not just the last thing? In the back. Okay, I'm going to try to repeat that. Okay. So the question is basically, if you're expanding every year, and sounds like exponentially. If you're expanding exponentially every year, does it make sense to do whole farm with revenue? And I will say, get with me after it. We can talk about it because I can't say with certainty off the top of my head. But there are growing provisions for farm growth, but it is capped. So you can't just walk into your agent's office and say, last year I had 200 acres of whatever, but this year I'm going to grow 5,000 acres of watermelons. That's, we have to be kind of responsible, but with the taxpayer money. But yeah, there are provisions for growing farms, and you can, and I believe it's capped, but there is a way to do some expansion. And also, if you're, I'll punt it to my colleagues over in FSA. You may also be eligible for depending on what the crop is, you may be eligible for NAP coverage or some of their programs. Help out with that. Anything else? Nothing on the hurricane program? I thought for sure. I was prepared. In the back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, like I mentioned, the data that is used to determine that is totally external to RMA. So we do not generate that. It is government data, it's NOAA, but it's not within USDA at all. So essentially, we've designed the program, but it's designed based on that data. And from our perspective, to some extent, the data is what it is. But I can tell you that those quality checks, at least for the wind data, which comes from the National Hurricane Center, that data is typically quality checked. It's my understanding that data is quality checked twice. Once pretty close to the storm, like a month later or whatever. But then NOAA, or the National Hurricane Center, usually does a general quality check at the end of the hurricane season. And so, which would be, and it's about now usually is when it comes out. So there additional counties may trigger, but we're kind of also at the, not mercy, but we get the data as it is. We don't generate that data. So the trade-off of that, though, is that because it's all data-based, because it's all based on data, it's very quick, right? So the counties that do trigger, we usually know that within a couple of weeks. It's not always the case. Like with Helene, it actually, in the National Hurricane Center, that IB Tracks office, the one that does the IB Tracks data, is actually in Asheville. So they were very heavily impacted by the storm. But we generally, those payments go out pretty quickly. It's designed to do that. It's designed to be a kind of a quick and rough payment to get money out as quickly as possible so that you could start rehabbing whatever, if it's orchards or whatever, so that you can start the work, the cleanup work. So, but yes, great question. Thank you. Did I repeat that question? The question was, Pierce County was impacted by the hurricane. It did not trigger. Was there any update on that?
Are those endorsements for the hurricane and tropical storm available for whole farm, or is it just at
That is a great question, and no, they are not. And I should have said that. Thank you for bringing that up. Oh, sorry. Yes, that great question that I didn't repeat. The question was, is hurricane insurance protection, HIPWE, and the tropical storm option available with whole farm? And the answer is no, it is not. The technical answer is hurricane insurance is only able to attach to products under the basic provisions. Well, that's not even technically right, but just no. The short answer is no, it can't. It has to do with the rating.
Of your FECI policyholders, what percentage of them are buying those endorsements?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can tell you at least in my region, it's high. It's pretty high. And I know they introduced the program in 2020, and the liability at least has doubled, I think, every year since. So don't quote me on that, but I think. And the question still didn't repeat it? they're not going to let me do this anymore. Okay. Yeah. The question was, what percentage of MPCI growers are electing the hurricane coverage? And the answer is a lot. What else? Okay, so the question was, beginning farmer, don't really know where to start, what to do. There's a lot of forms, there's a lot of companies. How do you know what to do? Okay, so first of all, I will say that because RMA does the insurance, like the meat and bones of it, it's the same insurance no matter which company you buy it from. So the rates, the policy, the procedures, all of that is the same because we write all of that. The only thing that you're shopping for, and well, I mean, I guess maybe not the only thing, but the thing that comes to mind that you're shopping for is basically customer service. Like who do you want to deal with? So I would say to that beginning farmer, step one is go to your county FSA office. You need to go to FSA. Step two is you need to call a crop insurance agent. And it really, I would just go to that agent locator tool. I would call the so for whole farm, there's actually a list of like RMA is publishing or has published, I'm not sure if it's come out yet, but they're publishing a list, working on a list of agents who kind of specialize in writing whole farm policies because it's such a different thing. There's a lot of agents that specialize in that. So, but that aside, kind of specialty aside, I would just pick some agents and start calling people and figure out who you want to work with, who you vibe with, because they're all selling you the same insurance. So the question was, like with Milton, there was, when Hillsborough County, the northern half was very flooded and had a ton of rain from Milton, and the southern half was very dry, so didn't get hardly any rain at all. And then the question was about the appropriateness of using an average. Well, so I'll say two things. Number one, RMA, this is still a relatively new program, so RMA is always, reviewing things like tweaking, looking for ways to improve programs. So, I mean, I'm not ruling anything out here. But you have to aggregate it some way. It would be very difficult to pay out those claims on a grid basis because those grids don't pay attention to any other geographic lines. So not just county boundaries, but they don't line up with PLSS lines. They don't line up with even farm numbers. I mean, it might split a farm, it might split a road, it might so you have to average it somehow, or you have to aggregate it somehow. And we to roll it out, it was not me. That decision was made way above me. But we RMA decided that that was the most appropriate way to do it for now. But that's not to say that they're not looking at ways to improve it in the future. And with that, I think we're wrapping it up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Can we give applause to all of our speakers?